Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Vanessa. So with cabbage. Personally, I am wary of letting it on the menu because even if we subject vegetables to heat treatment, a number of microorganisms. Sam kept saying something about the cafe's current problems. But Vanessa heard him, but didn't listen. All her attention was magnetically drawn to a text message from an unknown number. "Your husband has a mistress?" That's what it said. They also had the address where the immoral lovebirds were to meet, as well as the scheduled time for the outrage. Vanessa darted a glance at the wall, where a large clock hung above the certificate of honor for the Golden Mitten contest. On their backing was a picture of Paris and lots of scarlet roses, a gaudy thing. But they bought them on a wedding trip when they were in the most romantic city on earth. And ever since then, Vanessa considered them as if they were her talisman. It was this watch that was with them always while she and her husband realized their dream. And according to the position of the hands of the clock, the next betrayal was about to take place. Exactly 55 minutes later, there was a nasty lump in the throat. My heart beat frequently and rhythmically in my nose. Fell as if Vanessa was about to childishly roar desperately and resentfully at the world. But she shyly clasped her hand tightly, so the nails with the fresh cherry manicure spun into her palm. She took a deep breath and with a low whistle, exhaled through her teeth calmly. So what happened? Finally, she turned her gaze and attention to Sam. The chief cook froze, clapping his eyes. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. So the Brussels sprouts are all off-white and the corn is canned. The cans are deflated, so throw them away. Nodded Vanessa, rising from behind the table of the head of the catering, and grabbed the handbag standing on it. And what about the menu? I can't buy new products at 6 o'clock somewhere. What am I supposed to do? You're a smart guy, Sam. Vanessa took her coat off the rack, grabbed her scarf, grabbed her gloves. We'll be changing suppliers. That's a definite. Think of something. Change the menu for now. For the next few days, okay, at your discretion. She walked right past him. Out of the office came the young tomato chef. Mick followed her. All tomorrow, close today on your own. Okay, but you'll manage. It's not the first time. Get dressed by the greenhouse. It's early September. Walk to the parking lot belonging to the cafe and get in the car. Start the engine. Vanessa coolly drove forward to where she needed to go. But at the same time, she was hysterical and refused to believe that such a thing was possible. Or believe that cheating was possible. It was long overdue, and she was just blind, a fool, confident in the unshakable style of her feminine happiness. They'd known each other since high school. Vanessa had been in it since she was a freshman. Benjamin transferred after his parents traded in the apartment. There was some family intrigue over living space with relatives moving to another part of town. He was a donkey above everyone in the class, but he could not claim the status of a threat and a menace because he was still very thin. For which, by the way, the witty ones nicknamed him Skeleton. "Are you a goth?" Vanessa asked him once. She just had to make conversation with the new kid at recess. So she said the first thing that popped into her head. "It's just that you're always in black and your hair is long." "No," Benjamin replied. "Just black hair. It's my grandmother's. She says it's how a person keeps the earth's energy." "I see," said Vanessa, who actually had more questions about the novelties. By the will of the teacher, they found themselves at the same desk, and this also contributed to their bonding. Soon the classmates realized that Benjamin, despite its necessity, nothing. So the guy studied well, but did not give up and could even give a write-off. He did not mess with bullies, but no one touched him. Why? Benjamin just had, as the boys joked, a super ability to resolve any conflict with just one look. And they respected him when it became known that he had been working part-time since he was 14. So he has his own pocket money, mercifully given by his parents for good behavior. And slowly, by the last year of school, a small company of Vanessa, Benjamin, and Tony had formed. That redhead and glasses, you and Tony. Tony was a typical excellent student and literally a nerd because he was eager to study all the flora of the planet. He went abroad on some kind of grant after graduation. And for 6 years he wrote long letters to his friends full of Latin names of fauna. He was studying, I think, shrubs in Mongolia or Brazil. But then it just kind of went to zero. He was a good kid, Tony. All we had to do now was reminisce about a former friend. And then there was Nancy, a good girl, and there seemed to be nothing more to say about her, because she was, well, such a good girl, she studied roughly. But the teachers sometimes grumbled, saying, well, somebody's in charge of the scholastics, and she doesn't take anything from her own head. She was always neatly combed, clean, dressed Monday, sundresses, water, caress on Tuesday abdominal suit. Wednesday, sundress and caress again. Thursday, skirt and blouse. Friday, dresses with old-fashioned all-yellow fifth lace collars. Yes, Nancy dressed for school clearly on schedule and never took compote or scones or anything sweet at all to the canteen. Sugar, the white death, she explained. One day, her resistance to the treat. I don't want to die. Young, I have a long and decent life ahead of me. Nancy never let anyone cheat and didn't talk much about herself. I mean, she did. But it sounded strange for a teenage girl, and even creepy. A decent person doesn't like pop music. He listens to classical music, respects opera. You have to live your life so you won't be ashamed in front of your great-grandfather. No, artists draw, children just dabble, and felt-tip pens are poisonous nonsense. They'll give birth to sick children. You should marry in such a way that you won't be ashamed in front of your grandmothers. That's the sort of thing Nancy used to say. When, for example, she was asked about her hobbies or why she was so glum in art class. Nancy once told Benjamin, who by senior year not only got a haircut, but started wearing jeans and t-shirts. Basically, he looked like a regular kid. You're not twice if you're in a cult. Is there something going on at home? Benjamin was being humorous, but the subtext was serious. He just had a personal adolescent confrontation with his grandmother, who was a generally nice woman, but with some weirdness. Granny had moved to her daughter in the city from the countryside, abandoning the household and the familiar world. To help raise her grandson, helped, hampered, took care of the pension, did not spare to help the young family, but was a little bit with oddities. But Benjamin still loved her very much. Graduation, by the way, remained in Vanessa's memory for many years as the most beautiful events in the world. To be more precise, its first half, because the second half became a nightmare. But that day began wonderfully. In the morning, a hairdresser came to their home, who built on the head of a young girl hairstyle worthy of Pompadour, as said the master of beauty herself. It was curls, and the curls were crunchy. And from how much they were drenched with lacquer, and it was all covered with roses and pearls. There was makeup too, and not a timid drop of lipstick and mascara, but the grown-up version with cream powder blush, and even black pencil. Mom, though, cautiously asked, isn't that a little much? For a 17-year-old girl from a high school gala. But the hairdresser, Aunt Jenna, stuck her tongue out, looked angry and shook a magazine that said, in big letters, Fashion from Hollywood itself. You want your daughter to be the prettiest, don't you? Aunt Jenna asked. I want her to be my happiest, Vanessa's mom sighed. But since she likes it so much herself, Vanessa's dress was a looker. Flex colors of natural silk with added synthetics, with a heart cut out, and even the sandals were gold. Daddy had set aside a generous amount from his paycheck for one thing for his daughter. In general, at the prom she felt like a real princess, catching admiring glances. But what really mattered to her was the attention of only one man, Benjamin. And when the solemn school part was over and the graduates went up to the ship, the main and all terribly expected part of the holiday was expected on the water, then Benjamin suddenly drew Vanessa to a secluded corner where he stood close, took her hands and, looking into her eyes, said, in 3 months we will be 18 years old. Let's get married. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. It was that moment when Vanessa realized with delight that it was all over. Childhood was behind her, and here it was grown up, happy, incredible life opened its arms to her. She laughed, smiled at him, and told him she agreed. So they stood near the engine room in a secluded corner and gazed dreamily at each other. Nancy suddenly turned to Vanessa and saw her friend peering out of the corner. She was deathly pale and her face was twisted. Vanessa realized what was going on. Nancy repeated, and rushed after the alumna, who ran to the upper deck. On the way, Nancy fell briskly to her knees, but didn't even seem to notice it. She caught up with her on the upper deck, where the tack and sway of the couple's dance was sounding. "Nancy, listen," Vanessa said. "We didn't mean to hurt you. And I love him, don't I?" She whispered back. Vanessa swallowed the words she still wanted to say. She had guessed that for a long time, hadn't she? It was hard not to decipher the glances Nancy was throwing at Benjamin. It was hard to ignore how already a bit wordy he was. The strange girl was starting to completely stutter and muddle her words when he appeared next to her. Except Vanessa seemed like it wasn't all serious. What kind of love? Nancy had it all she knew exactly. There was no relationship. Yeah, she didn't even hold hands with boys, much less ever have anything. There was no romance with Benjamin. And now Vanessa thought they were all getting along. They'd talk like friends. She would explain how things with Benjamin were real. And Nancy would understand, even be happy for her. How could she not? And she'll be her maid of honor at the wedding. And Nancy will find happiness. Not with Benjamin. A senior called out to them. "Don't get too close to the boards. Those fences are a little flimsy. It's not a ship at all, but a trough," he muttered and went to the table with appetizers. But neither Nancy nor Vanessa paid any attention to his words. The sun shone at 6 o'clock, hidden first behind a wood pearl of gray clouds, and then hid behind a truly freight cloud. The wind came in rough gusts. The surface of the river merged in waves. "I loved him, I always have," exclaimed Nancy and clasped her hands. "Listen, Vanessa. It was unpleasant that their scandal might be at the center of the general celebration." She moved closer to Nancy, wanted to take her somewhere where she could talk without strangers. "You've got it all wrong. Benjamin and I are serious. Nancy, let's have a quiet, calm conversation." "Nancy, okay. Who would ever think that you and Benjamin could have anything? Because I'm not as pretty and smart and straight a student as you." The girl snapped, her face creased ugly. She ran her hand over her face, smearing her lipstick. Yes, this day Nancy changed her habits and painted her lips a piercing scarlet color. "I hate you," shouted out, and she stepping back, clutching her back to the side of the ship. "Traitor. I thought we were friends." The other students were starting to look back at them already. Nancy stopped the hysterics, snapped back at Vanessa. "You and Benjamin have never even been on a date. What makes you think he has?" Vanessa didn't have time to finish, because suddenly there was a prolonged scraping of metal. Everything happened so fast that no one had time to do anything. All that was left was to watch in horror. Here Nancy staggered, leaning backward again. Ridiculously, she waved her arms. And the next instant, the segments of the fence, the deck of the ship simply broke off and flew down into the dark waves of the river, on which the early summer storm was already playing fiercely, and Nancy flew after it with a desperate shriek. Naturally, there was a commotion. Someone threw a life preserver overboard. The captain came running. People were screaming and pointing their fingers in the water. It was a terrible accident. And coincidentally, it didn't end well. And yet it didn't end as nightmarishly as it could have. The thing was that the ship was just passing by a shoal, on which the volume of the shoal was a few Nancy downstream, exactly in my typical doll literally nailed, her shoal. But it so happened that the girl was just dragged through a sunken tree, and there was still some junk iron. Sharp rocks. Anyway, Nancy survived, but by the time she was rescued, she was badly injured. Word got out to last night's graduates. Slipped into a coma, and the ugliness on her face and body. Fractures open, scars that would last a lifetime. Vanessa was in shock. She felt so guilty. After all, if it hadn't been for their fight, Nancy would certainly have been more careful and not fallen overboard, but she hadn't had the chance to say anything to her friend. To apologize to her because Nancy's parents, as soon as their daughter's condition allowed it, had taken her away and moved to another town. Why? Well, I guess that's what they decided for some reason. Yeah, it was all just awful. But Vanessa did not have a chance to swim long in the consequences of what had happened, because life went on after all. Vanessa, it was time to take care of her future. And it wasn't easy. The thing was that her family wanted her daughter to become a lawyer. Vanessa had nothing against law, but her soul lay to something else. She wanted to be a chef. It so happened that since childhood she loved to cook. Her mother and grandmother and great-grandmother. And in general, the whole female part of the family admired and praised. After all, rarely a girl of 12 years can cook a full lunch or dinner for the whole family, and even herself tears constantly let, say, to the stove. But then, in general, admiration diminished when they realized that Vanessa decided to connect her fate with it. How so? How so, dear, serious practice? Prospects may even have their own law practice, but Vanessa was lucky with her folks. They grumbled, lamented the unfulfilled great hopes, but supported in the gastronomic dream. And Nancy enrolled as a chef, not in a technical school, but in a university. Her family paid for her studies and supported her in every possible way. Relations with Benjamin meanwhile developed smoothly, harmoniously, exactly according to the romantic scenario prescribed in advance. They met afterwards after the university, moved in together, so to speak, to live together. But it was clear to everyone that it was going to be a wedding. And the wedding was played, as it should be, with a white dress, doves, cake, shouts of bitterness, and a wedding trip to Paris for a week. Benjamin, by the way, decided to become a lawyer, and this partly consoled the family of his wife, who decided that okay, although take and manage to realize partly collective ambitions and dreams. Vanessa more than once said friends and colleagues that she is simply happy. Life goes on quietly, prosperously. There is income. The mortgage was taken and paid off ahead of schedule, but it seemed to Vanessa that she would give up everything in the world if her life came to her. The main thing that was missing to make her really happy, and the thing was that she could not get pregnant. Doctors' examinations, expensive clinics, and even attempts to eco. And then trips to remote villages to heal her Baucus, it was all useless. It was almost physical. It was painful to see off moms with strollers with an envious look in the street. How many times Vanessa had a dream. She is perky in the arms of babies on 6 blankets, and he is her greatest treasure in the whole world. And then the merciless awakening hit, and she was flooding her pillow with tears. Benjamin, too, was crushed. Without the density of their marriage, and what's most frustrating is that the doctors said it was as if both couples were healthy, but it wasn't working. You see, human biology, his nature is a unique thing, divorced one old man, a professor, to whom they went to counseling. Modern science believes that sometimes strong and full man and woman are not able to have children because of, so to speak, individual genetic incompatibility. And so when everything was tested, when everything became clear, Benjamin and Vanessa found themselves faced with a choice. What to do next? After all, it was clear that theoretically, if each of them tried to build another family, there would probably and almost certainly be children there. Maybe we should just get a divorce. Vanessa once asked on the day this shower conversation took place. They were celebrating their 9th wedding anniversary. We could stay friends. She turned to her husband and shared any other words. That's how he looked at her. Don't ever talk about divorce again, he said. You love me and I love you. Since there are no children, it's fate. But we are married and only death will separate us. Remember, and they never talked about divorce again. And what of relatives and friends, even the closest ones, except mom and dad and those people who could be trusted? Anyway, they were the only ones who knew the whole truth. The rest of us thought it was just each spouse being infertile. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Benjamin, when all the guests had left, gave his wife another gift. What's this? She asked. When she opened the gift paper rustling in the night, she found a puffy folder with some documents. Something you've been dreaming of for so long, smiled her husband. I thought it was time for us to take a decisive step and change everything in our lives. Vanessa, raising an eyebrow in surprise, opened the folder and aghast almost dropped it. Because there were estimates and all other documentation related to the opening of their own cafe. Yes, a long time ago, back on their wedding trip, they had talked about it, but jokingly. So one day they said they'd open their own place. I've inquired, Benjamin added. We've been pre-approved for a loan to open a business. I've already looked at the premises. My favorite. I found out everything. He concluded, shocked. We'll pull the wife into our arms. We can handle it. What do you say? Vanessa then cried long and loud. She was crying. She was barely able to cry. She was hiccuping with tears. But they were tears of joy. She'd been dreaming for so long. Yes, she kept putting it off. And her husband, her favorite man, took it and did it. Took all the decisive steps. And now it remained only to agree to risk everything with him for the sake of their common dream. Relatives and friends perceived the business project of the spouses ambiguously. Some praised, saying, "Keep it up. Go ahead. You'll become millionaires." Some of them twisted their fingers at the temple. After all, they decided to take a loan against the security of the apartment. And it was also required, by the way, to leave a stable job and go into open water. When it is known how many novice businessmen are soon disappointed in their ideas and remain, as they say, without pants. But Benjamin and Vanessa did not listen to anyone. They were stubbornly determined and boldly acted. They decided that they would not open either a flashy restaurant or a refined coffee shop, where people come for authors' drinks. They decided that they wanted to open an institution with homemade, tasty, simple and inexpensive cuisine, which, however, would not be a banal canteen, but an institution with its own zest. And how many difficulties came to light when you went from plans to reality? Sleepless nights risking losing your business and your apartment. Trying to guess which dishes people would like. One time they even had strange wigs and leather jackets stop by. Honestly, it was like a time machine from the 90s. There was something more about the roof. But Benjamin threatened them. That he's a lawyer, he's got big connections, and he's going to show them how to play the mafia. And those weird-looking checks never showed up again. And then, after a few years that seemed to fly by like a day, the couple realized they'd made it. They have their own cafe canteen, which has firmly established itself in the city's catering market and has its own clientele. Benjamin and Vanessa, although there was at some point such an opportunity, decided not to expand. Of course, opening new cafes of their own chain would have increased their income, but it would have forced them to attract outsiders to the top of the business. This would not have allowed to keep such a close eye on everything, to participate in all spheres of life of their brainchild. So they left it the way it was, and everything was fine. The family business was doing well. It would seem that what else is needed? But Vanessa had already accepted the fact that they wouldn't have children. All right, let it be. So it was indeed fate. But lately, in the last year, she suddenly began to notice how they were drifting apart. No, there were no fights, no scandals. But a coldness had crept into their marriage imperceptibly, just as a night frost can suddenly engulf a garden. Although the day before had been the most similar, but Vanessa had shrugged it off for the time being. Come to think of it, less socializing, not kissing in the morning, and not talking as often as before. I love you. After all, they're not young people anymore. They've been married for years. It's only natural. And then the stresses of business, when you barely have time to eat and take sleeping pills to sleep a wink. It's also a reason not to drown in the body, a sneeze of tenderness. With the other half, it was only that stupid contest, for which Benjamin obviously did not apply from a great mind, and Vanessa still did not find time to take it off. Anyway, it just seemed like married life was going on. They lived like normal people, nothing nightmarish, nothing to get hysterical about. But now, as Vanessa drove the car through the evening streets, she realized no, there were alarm bells. Yes, she was stupid and naive and had ignored them. Like the fact that her husband had been on the phone with someone a couple times and then abruptly ended the conversation when she walked into the room. Your husband has a mistress. The text of the text message seemed to be imprinted in fiery letters in her brain, and Vanessa, letting out a low groan, slammed her fists on the king in frustration. Av almost lost her grip on the steering wheel with both hands and bit her lip. She couldn't yet figure out what she was going to do when she didn't. Not the time for that right now, she just needed to figure it out, to make sure it was true. And so here she was, Velvet Restaurant. The text said they'd chosen the summer veranda, that it was their usual spot. Good evening. Grew up in front of Vanessa, a smiling girl, a waitress, but she only waved her off and walked resolutely forward. Many establishments still kept summer verandas. This one offered guests cozy plaid plaids and used tiny lamps imitating antique lanterns as lighting on the tables. Vanessa noted with a professional eye the well-chosen palette of the interior and the unobtrusive music playing in the background. She walked forward without feeling her feet. There was the familiar back of her head in front of her sitting in a chair, and a woman sitting next to her. She spotted her before Benjamin did and turned around. Vanessa stopped abruptly, as if she had hit an invisible barrier. Her eyes darkened. She exhaled 3 breaths, recognizing her rival. "Oh, Sam, I thought you were stuck in there until morning." Kate winked at the guy and boldly but innocently took him under her arm in a friendly manner. "Just had to check things out well. There are all sorts of things that happen," Sam said, squinting at his companion with embarrassment. Kate was 8 years younger than him. Barely 18 was this red-headed doll who must be out of her petite nether regions. She barely reached the top of his shoulder. She also reminded him of Kate because of her playful directness. Kate had been working as a waitress at Caesars for 3 months now. She'd gotten the job in a very unusual way. She just came in and said she wanted to work there. Although, by the way, in the ad clearly said that you need a person with experience, ready for intensive loads. Running around on your feet all day with heavy trays, that's no joke. The interview was conducted by the owner herself, Vanessa, and everyone was actually shocked that she hired the new girl. She wouldn't last a week, Molly said. A dishwasher who worked part-time at Caesars because her pension wasn't enough to live on. "She's embarrassing us," she rolled her eyes. Emily is a waitress with the figure and face of a model. "I love every spare moment I have on my smartphone," where she watched Turkish soap operas. Emily was very professional. She was tipped all the time. But sympathizing with the girl was hindered by her arrogance. She turned her nose up, saying that she was waiting for her Prince Charming and that he must be a millionaire. Such words were like a knife to Sam's heart, because he was in love with Emily a little bit. With a high level of unrequited love, and did not want Sam to notice at all the signs of attention that Kate was giving him. He perceived her no more than a little sister. Yeah, I guess that's what it was. Sam had always wished he had a little sister, or a family at all. He was an orphan. Once a long time ago, just a kid, he swore to himself that he would never repeat the path of his parents, who drank themselves to death. And when he got out, the freedom and will of adult life did not turn his head at all, no. The guy graduated from culinary school, managed to work on the pizza and sushi exchanges. Then he cooked for the culinary department of a large supermarket, and then, taking the prize of audience sympathy. At the competition met with her, which at this competition took first place. And so by a happy accident, Sam began to work at Caesars, quickly working his way up from ordinary cook to chef and finally chef. Sam believed he was perhaps as compensation from the universe. For the bitter orphan childhood, he now lived a happy life. Everything was going well for him. If only there was still love in his life, but so far there was no love. He could devote himself entirely to professional affairs. And now Sam was proud that Benjamin, the owner of the place, had decided to take part in a new cooking competition. It was going to be a huge event. It was to be covered by both local and foreign press. And its uniqueness lay in the fact that it was to bring together the best catering establishments in the city. And the competition was not in something trivial, but in dessert. Sam believed. On such a space, his bosses will go wild and will definitely win. And this victory, of course, will strengthen Caesar's position in the catering industry. After all, the competitors are not slumbering. Only in the last 6 months on the same street opened 2 establishments. In general, it was necessary to move in order not to go bankrupt. And the more offensive was Sam, when he learned that she, it turns out, considers the idea of the competition is a complete nonsense, and even scolded her husband for this. What does Caesars have to do with an institution with average and even modest cynic, where they serve unpretentious dishes, and a contest for professional pastry chefs, for elite-class establishments? What we're going to impress everyone with in a high-pitched tone. So everyone heard, Did Vanessa Zatia with apple pie or girlfriends, or maybe with seasonal berries? We're just gonna get laughed at. Sam, aren't you listening to me? He was pulled out of his musings. Katya's offended tone and a palpable nudge of her small elbow in the ribs. Excuse me. Pensive. Sam coughed. Nervously, the rain began to fall, and he opened his umbrella over them. Kate was a terrible stretch, and despite the wet weather forecast, the umbrella was not with him. I asked, seriously repeated Kate, and her voice trembled strangely. Maybe we can go somewhere this weekend to the movies. Can there be a new movie like this movie? And let's absent-mindedly answered Sam. About what a movie about love with a huff, replied Kate, and so shot his blue eyes at him, thinking that Sam understood, and he got caught. Trapped himself, but he blanched. He couldn't just say, like a fool, that he'd remembered something important for the weekend. He called himself a dick. And then, as they say, Sam sighed well. What movie theater are we going to? After all, he thought, it's only a movie, not a date. So he will not owe anything to the picture. But from now on, he'd have to keep his ear to the ground with this duck. Looks like it's not such a kitten. Kate never worked a day in her young life before coming to Caesars. Why would she? If her mom provides everything she wants, if she's spoiled like a princess. But there was a downside to that. Rigid, strict control. The only thing she needed to complete the picture was a flood collar. Kate grew up without a father. No, there was one, of course, but he wasn't talked about in their family. Her mom used to tell the little girl when she asked if he was dead. But then, when she was 14, she learned the truth. Her mother had given birth to her from a donor, flown overseas, and there in the clinic everything happened. Simply because Nancy wanted a child so badly. But she didn't want to get married and have relationships with men. That she strictly forbade herself, and Kate realized very early on why. It was because Nancy had a big problem with her appearance. Her face from her left temple to her chin was crisscrossed with bumps and crooked scars on her neck and shoulders, as if red reformed flowers were blooming. The doctors said that for some reason, perhaps due to a hormonal disruption, the body was unable to fully repair the areas damaged in the accident. The skin was formed with thick pigment flecks. For this reason, Nancy never wore anything revealing. And if she had to leave the house, she stood in front of the mirror for long periods of time applying makeup. But it didn't hide the scars of her uneven face. Already at the age of 10, Kate knew grandparents in general native moms. They spent a lot to make her beautiful again. But the peculiarities of the body, its reaction to Lisa, they did not allow Nancy to fully visit plastic surgeons. After all, to somehow improve her appearance required surgery. And so at the family council, they decided that health was more important. And Nancy herself began to treat her peculiarities already philosophically. However, when Kate was little, she was still very offended that other children had fathers and she did not. "Mommy, you are my most beautiful," often said a simple-minded girl. "You should all love you? Let's find me a daddy. And you a husband." Sometimes Nancy would laugh at this. But more often she got very angry and told me not to talk nonsense. Later, in adolescence, when Kate was already beginning to realize herself as a person, she realized the whole nightmare her mother was living in. So, in principle, Kate allowed for the idea that even with physical disabilities, it was possible to love a person. But she also realized that the likelihood that her mother would meet such a spiritually rich man, for whom appearance is not the main thing, is extremely small. As for the mother-daughter relationship in general, it was good, but complicated. The fact was that Nancy firmly knew what was good for her daughter, and Kate thought it was completely stubborn teenage stubbornness that she knew better. The final straw that created the storm was her mother's words, which sounded like an order. That after school, Kate would go to a university of economics and become a manager. "I wanted to go to Africa to study animals." Kate objected, as if she were a child. "Mom, I'm not going to make a good manager. I'll die of boredom." "That's what, daughter?" Nancy said sternly, "As long as you live in my house and on my money, I'll decide what you do." And clearly, Nancy was used to commanding, because she herself had worked in the personnel department of a large enterprise all her life and kept subordinates from small to large, not counting her direct superiors. That's what they call in a tight grip. But since Kate character clearly went to the mother, and maybe in the mysterious father of the donor, the easy victory Nancy did not win, and the daughter simply hid her papers. So in the room she hid that her mother and grandparents could not find. Here announced Kotenko, folding her arms across her chest, and looking Volchok, I will not go to your university. No way, I'll go next year, wherever I decide. In the meantime, I'll live on my own money and pay for the utilities. Nancy only twisted her head and the next day blocked the card with which her daughter used to spend money. The grandmother said everyone wanted to give her a heart attack, and another day later gave her granddaughter one of her cards. I won't let my gold starve. Winked at Granny too. Grandpa kept neutral for a week, and then said that love for animals is a sign of a good person, but not obedience to the will of parents. It's a sign of a rotten soul. So you have to look at it. What you're gonna make of yourself, he said. But if you don't fool around and seriously stick to your goal, I'll support you. And with such peripecias, a fake kitten found herself in the place of a waitress at Caesar's. The job, by the way, was harder than she imagined. But Kate, though Mykola, in the evenings was not going to quit. You repeated, Vanessa, enchanted, and was horrified, looking at the one she thought had disappeared from her life forever. Hi, said Nancy. It's been a while. She grinned. Do you want coffee? What? But how could you? Raised her voice to Vanessa. She was putting her finger on her husband. What a bastard. And I'm with her. So you were in love with her then. So you've had it between you for a long time. How long has it been between us that you're dumbfounded? Asked Benjamin. There must have been something in Vanessa's tone, because the small fairy tale company began to look around the cafe. My husband has a mistress. Muffled from Vanessa's lips. But why? She grimaced in disgust. Although it seemed obvious, a pang of disbelief glanced at the couple in front of her. Favorite. Benjamin, rising, took a step towards Vanessa. There is nothing between us. Vanessa's lips trembled at the traitorous tentacles in her nose. You expect me to believe you. Hang in there, man. An inebriated voice came from a neighboring table. Behind him, some guy was sitting with a girl in a short dress. Until the last one. Then they might believe it. Veja, are you crazy? His companion risked pulling his arm. Stop it, I'm ashamed of you. And you lied to me yourself. Eh? Vanessa didn't care that their conflict seemed to have worked like the first fallen domino knuckle, dragging someone around in a similar showdown. You can trust him, Nancy said. We're just dating. Ah, that's how Vanessa deftly turned away from her husband and slapped his outstretched hand. That's interesting. How so? Does that mean we're friends, and where do friendships take place in the bunkhouse? Should we call security? Whispered one waitress to another. What if they start trashing the place? I don't think they should. Whispered back the other seemingly decent people. Vanessa stood there and barely felt herself in reality. She was torn by contradictory feelings. On the one hand, a burning resentment and a willingness to send their marriage into tatters right now and throw the wedding ring in the traitor's face. On the other, a desperate longing to believe everything, even the outright lies. Let your spouse take you away from here and forget everything like a terrible dream. Vanessa sobs muzzle and often oversees vision behind the fog. Because the tears did rush from her eyes. Vanessa reached as through a layer of absorbent cotton to her the voice of her ex-girlfriend. There's nothing between us. He's telling the truth. And then Vanessa finally burst into hysterical sobs. She flopped down. Would have come out with her heel on the floor. But her husband gently grabbed her by the shoulders and sat her on a chair, brought her a glass of water. The waitress girl handed it to him. But I got a text. Vanessa was rambling. What's going on? Why are you two meeting in secret? Is it true? Is it not true? She asked, shifting her gaze from her ex-girlfriend to her husband and back again. It is, they both answered in unison. What place did you get? Nancy asked. And from whom? I don't know, shrugged Vanessa and took out her smartphone and put it on the table. Here's the message. Nancy and Benjamin leaned over the screen. I don't know that number, Benjamin muttered. This is some kind of evil joke. Nancy, what do you think? Oh, you little brat, Nancy exclaimed. and she struck the table with such force that the tiny vase of late herbarium bouquets, which had fallen to the floor, shattered. "I'll pay," guiltily turned Benjamin to the waiters, who had just been sighing calmly. But after the outburst from Nancy, they tensed up again. There was no way to get away from the dinner grandmother had prepared. And now, finding herself in her room, Kate from the table tone unbuttoned the leg of her jeans. Wistfully, thinking about the fact that she'd swallowed what must have been a week's worth of calories, no less. Good thing at least she was now spared lunch at Nana's, because she was eating lunch at work. That's for family, though. Kate said that she lunches there, and herself tried to limit herself to an offended yogurt or an apple, because she considered herself a half. Yes, weight versus BMI hinted that this was true. It was a magical evening. He and Sam went to the movies and sat in the back rows. He was crunching popcorn, drinking unhealthy soda, and she was looking more at him than at the screen. Kate was in love to the point of butterflies in her stomach, and genuinely thought it was real feelings. And the fact that she'd had such a crush before that was the real deal. What kind of romantic infatuation could there be in high school? Just a dalliance? They were boys who were shy. True, it may have been partly so that this grandmother and mother strictly controlled her social circle, not allowing her to hang out with boys who wouldn't be afraid to say, at least on the eve of graduation, "I fell in love." But what was what was. Now Kate considered herself a grown-up, practically an accomplished woman, and was ready to literally fight for her happiness. Since Sam was so uncomprehending, to think he hadn't even tried to kiss her for nothing. It turns out that she poured those expensive perfume from the elite brand, which promised, not according to advertising, to drive any man crazy. The next morning, Kate didn't have to go to work, a legitimate day off, and she was going to get some sleep and then go to the zoo. But the morning right after breakfast, when Grandma left to visit a neighbor, they were both into growing orchids and were going to move the plants to winterize. And when Grandpa left for the clinic, he had an appointment with an ophthalmologist. In the morning, Kate's mother suddenly knocked on Kate's room. "Daughter, we need to talk," she said. The overtone was calm, almost affectionate. But Kate had a feeling as if an unknown animal had slid across her back like a clean paw. It was a bad feeling. And then Kate walked into the hall and saw the look on her mother's face. Oh, she knew what was coming. "Daughter, how do you explain this?" asked Nancy, and pointed at the smartphone and the texts Vanessa had sent her the day before. Kotia stretched out in a string. She folded her arms across her chest and pressed her lips together. What did she have to say about it? "Because I want to protect you," the girl blurted out, and then, unable to stand the fact that her head was spinning like tornadoes, a field tornado ripping through her head. "Because I can't watch you ruin yourself." "Did you call Benjamin?" asked Sam, standing in the supervisor's office. "I asked for no middle name, but it was Benjamin. Because I feel too solid, you know." "I understand, Benjamin." "Sorry, I won't do it again. Round my eyes, Sam." And all I had to do was grin at him. What a weirdo, huh? He's not a small man, and he's not a teenager, but he acts like a kid, honestly. But actually, Benjamin Sam sympathized. It was weird. But sometimes he caught himself thinking that if he ever had a son, he would want him to be like Sam. Probably just as smart, good-natured, hardworking, talented. Yeah, it's an unfair world. Some bastards, alcoholics, throw their own child at the mercy of fate. And people who dream of children can't give birth to them. I'm talking about the pastry contest. Benjamin, thoughtfully tapping his pen on the table. I think Vanessa is right. She is a good cook, but not a pastry chef, and has never been good at desserts. Therefore, her candidacy to participate is canceled. I mean, that's what Sam said disappointedly. So Keezer's out. It was such a brilliant chance. There is a chance, Benjamin grinned. And Teaser is in. You're just going to the contest. You what? I'm rounding my eyes, Sam. But Benjamin, I mean, it's impossible. The guy's got his hands up in the air. Why? Now Benjamin looked stern. You have a lot of experience. Not a bad education. There's experience in competitions. But there will be people like that out there, Sam objected. There's a chef from Adele's restaurant. He's in Michelin restaurants. Used to work in New York and London. And the coffee shop, they also have their own pastry shops all over the city. Such people. The guy took a step back, like he was about to be dragged off to the pageant right now. Benjamin, don't. You're a smart guy, Sam sighed, co-owner Caesar. And remember, when you first became chef, you suggested introducing tiramisu, glossy cakes, and a chocolate fountain to the menu. We, of course, said no. After all, our profile is the most common home-cooked food, and not something you can't make at home. But we'd have to complicate the kitchen, and the price tag would be high. We have to stay the course. We're like a good canteen in terms of prices and assortment, but like a cafe in terms of service and atmosphere. But now, Sam, this is your chance. And you're a man who's accomplished so much, aren't you? Will you let him in? There was silence in the office for a few minutes. Everyone was thinking about something else. And then Sam looked up, clear-eyed. He had made his decision. Okay, Benjamin, just Benjamin. Okay, I agree, I'll do my best. But if I win, he added with a cheerful smile, we'll discuss again what we can include in our menu. Deal. Deal, Benjamin smiled back at him. Kate didn't realize that her mother was ruining herself right away, and even at first, she was happy about it. And how could she not be happy that her mother, who was already over 40, suddenly decided that she was still a woman who did not want to spend her life without love? Which meant she needed to find a man to be her soulmate. Nancy suddenly decided that her physical imperfections were no reason to give up her personal happiness. Kate was thrilled, but it wasn't that simple. At first, Nancy tried to find a suitable candidate for future husband among her entourage, friends, buddies, and colleagues. There wasn't much choice, but one man reciprocated. His name was Nick, and at first glance, he seemed quite decent. His home does not drink, divorced. But that's just the little things in life. Anything can happen. But then suddenly Nick borrowed money from Nancy. Then he borrowed again. She upgraded his car and bought him a huge plasma TV. Then Nick said he wanted to start his own business, and therefore needed more money. I may be a historian, said Kate's grandfather, but I'm not out of my mind yet to fall for his lies. I mean, it's a common Alfonso. Nancy at first defended her lover, but then, as soon as she canceled Nicholas' financing, he immediately showed his true colors. Nancy naturally cried. But then she decided one failure doesn't solve anything. And after a while, she met a new man. His name was Gosha, worked in the car service, and he earned obviously well, because he was a master of high class, and it seemed that with him you can definitely be behind a stone wall. But suddenly it turned out that he dreams of a child, and only to have a child, and that's it. And then you can do whatever you want, sweetheart. It turned out that Gosha was the founder of his own philosophy, according to which his genes are among the most valuable on planet Earth and should be spread everywhere. In the end, Gosha admitted that he had a dozen kids at least all over the country. He'd also confessed that sometimes he switched his girlfriend's pregnancy prevention pills for ordinary vitamins. Anyway, Nancy broke up with him, a little horrified, and for a couple more months, very disturbed. Because she was just taking the pills and she was afraid. Was she pregnant? Nancy's next man was Martin, a handsome man just under 30, whom they met when, as a cab driver, he drove Nancy and her daughter to the dental clinic. And as with previous beaux, Martin had turned out to be a surprise. He just believed in aliens. He believed that the Earth is secretly ruled by reptiles, and to protect themselves from them, you need to drink infusion, special from herbs and mushrooms, which he himself collected. But that wasn't the end of it. After parting with Martin, other men appeared in Nancy's life. A bandit, an alcoholic, and another type, who decided that when the kitten turned 18, she would also become his mistress. And your mother's all right, winked the amateur sleuth. One day, Nancy. After that, by the way, Kate's grandmother drank heart drops for a long time. And grandfather threatened that Nancy should not be married off, but put in a madhouse as a spoil sport. Who? Said Lisa. Kate. Grandma, what kind of spell? Mom just gets the wrong men. If this keeps happening, I don't know how we're going to live. Lisa said, I don't know how we're going to live. A thorough family conversation took place, at which Nancy was persuaded with a chorus, "Stop trying men if you're not lucky." No love life. Well, that's just fate. What do you want? Father was telling young Nancy off like a fool. We have a place to live. The apartment for Kate is bought, the house will be finished, and the young people will have their own corner. 2 cars, savings for a rainy day. You have a profession and a salary that makes me jealous. We fly to Europe every year. We live. We don't know what to do. Is it on the men? That's all right. Don't embarrass me. I'm not risking myself or my daughter anymore. No more dates. It's a deal. And for a while, Nancy went quiet. She seemed to have forgotten all about trying to make a life for herself. But then Kate noticed something was wrong with her mom. She visited a beauty salon, bought a new dress and boots, but most importantly, her eyes were shining in a special way. Then Kate realized Mom was in trouble again, and she decided to stump another nonsense just on the route, just to find out who Mom was messing with again. But there was no need to play detective. Everything was decided by chance. Just one day, Kate was called into the office of the owner of Keezer's to talk about the peculiarities of the working schedule. And it so happened that the door to the office was slightly open, and she heard Benjamin talking on the phone and a few phrases in which slipped special such information about life. The little girl realized that Benjamin was talking to her mom, and she was just shocked. What kind of a nasty coincidence was this? And she also realized that even though Benjamin seemed like a normal man, he was not at all like the others. But her mother is in trouble again because Benjamin is married. Vanessa made a very good impression on Kate, and the girl decided that she had to act, so she sent her a message from her second phone number, which was unknown at work. All her fears and worries accumulated in her heart. Kate spilled out in a stream of emotional speech, overdriven by tears, gesticulation, such that almost knocked off the nightstand collection of grandmother's porcelain shepherdess. And finally, Kate fell silent. The girl was breathing hard, as if she'd run 100 meters. "I've said everything," she finished in a colorless voice. Nancy's daughter was shocked by what she heard. Yes, she was well aware of how unsuccessful her attempts to find a man had been. And she had given up all plans for personal happiness. She had learned to get used to a lot of things in her life. First, she had gotten used to the fact that her parents had taken her away from this town to another, away from anything that would remind her of tragedy. But then, after Nancy's grandmother died, they had decided to return to this hometown, because it was once Nancy who had been particularly insistent on leaving. And now with her passing, that commitment was being canceled. "My daughter, my dear," my Nancy stepped toward her, and though Kate tried to dodge, suddenly she hugged her, pulling her to her, took her hair away from her wet face, and gently stroked her cheek. "It's all right, but my silly girl, why didn't you say anything to me? Would you have listened to me?" clapped Kate. "You've been dragging things out with everyone to the last minute, till it got bad, and yet you shook your head. Nancy, we're all you and I'm grandparents. We've talked about everything. I realized that I guess it really wasn't fate. I guess I'm destined to spend the rest of my life alone. But honey, you've got it all wrong, Benjamin. I was really in love with him once," Nancy said thoughtfully, and tears welled up in her own eyes. And then she told Katya for the first time that she had once had feelings for Benjamin. But the silent one was timid and didn't even try to talk to him about it. And how it all ended, told neither he nor she, of course, was to blame for what happened, Nancy said. "It was all my fault. Stupid I was. But now years later, I just wanted to tell him that I had let go of those feelings, that things had changed. We met and decided we were just going to be friends. And as for his wife," Nancy grinned. "I didn't know what Vanessa was like now, did I? I was afraid she wouldn't approve. You know, they say it's impossible for a man and a woman to be friends. But it's not true. Maybe. Benjamin and I used to date. I don't deny it. But as friends, we'd walk around town, reminisce about our high school days. What's wrong with that? And what's in it for you, daughter? And what do I swear to you, my daughter? To make you believe that there was nothing between us. If Kate had any strength left, she would have burst again. Now from the realization of what a stupid thing she'd done, how she'd essentially set her mother up by putting her in such a bad position in front of her ex-girlfriend. I believe you. Kate nodded. Mommy, I'm so sorry, please. I didn't mean to. Yes, I forgive you. Nancy waved her hand. After all, it would be weird and wonderful if you didn't do something stupid at your age, so we'll just consider it a supplement to your belated teenage rebellion. By the way, there's my life as a job. All right, Kate smiled through her nose. It's all good. There's a contest coming up. But it's unlikely we'll win. The competitors are just dragons. And then there's this guy. I like him. She lowered her eyes. Come on, Mom beckoned her. Sit down and tell me about it. Let's go to the kitchen. I think Grandma's famous berry pie is still there. We'll talk over tea. That day, Vanessa went to work like a hard labor. The mood was a nightmare. Not only did her parents again read tedious lectures about the fact that she should go to university and not work as a waitress, but the guy she met on the dating site turned out to be not the youngest businessman with a startup worth $1 million, but an ordinary guy who immediately admitted that he put his photo on the shots with expensive cars and resorts in Dubai in order to attract girls. You know the saying, he said, taking Emily to a cheap diner that served donuts and didn't even have decent coffee, just the simplest of instant packets. You meet people by their clothes. I don't know, Emily replied, squeamishly setting aside the greasy donut. What do you think? Who's gonna go out with you after that? Why not? He shrugged. I'm a regular, normal guy. I'm not an oligarch. I work in a factory. I live with my mother and grandmother. We have an apartment in a nice neighborhood. There's greenery all around, and in the winter we make snow towns in the yard. But why do you do it? Emily asked stubbornly. She was just curious. Yes, Nick shrugged again. The girls today are you know what kind of girls, but their demands are high. What to do? Well, I figured I'm a normal guy. I want to date someone like you. Beautiful, smart. Don't think I'm gonna spend my life just working in a factory. I mean, I'll be a foreman later on, like my father was. You're a fool. Emily laughed, and, having risen, has dropped on a plastic table a handful of change. I can pay for the treats myself. Yes, wait, Nick tried to grab her by the arm, but the girl shuffled aside her nose. Yeah, but you wouldn't give a normal guy a chance. If I was rich, I'd stay. Is a tight wallet all that matters to you? And she's so beautiful. I thought you had an inner beauty too. Yeah, but I poked you, Emily, and I got out of your coffee. And so it was time to go to the hated job again. And Vanessa was 20 years old, and she realized that she would be like that without education. She would be a saleswoman or a waitress. But Emily was not going to go to university to lose her young years there, so that then she could sit on low wages for years while others would live beautifully. However, here's Caesar. She was only earning seniority and experience. And then she was going to luxury restaurants to get a job where the crowd is more decent. And she'd definitely be able to pick up a wealthy man, although just last night she had an idea. And what is she waiting for when she already has a wealthy man, that is, the co-owner of Skeezers? Emily had had a good time studying him. He seemed to be a gentleman, which meant one that would be easy to spin. As for his wife, Emily could see perfectly well that Vanessa, despite her substantial income, looked like a shepherdess. Her hair has gray hair, her makeup the most inept. He is her even old man, the figure with age has floated. That is called. If she had that kind of money, Emily would definitely walk like a queen and in the fall would go not on the shuttle bus, but in a private car with a driver and not in a jacket. Simple went from which the figure as a barrel and in a fur coat mink or even lynx. So Emily decided, why not? She is young, beautiful, fresh, and knows how to behave with men. Benjamin, who is accustomed to his spouse a woman's pleasant dish, will definitely not resist. The main organizer of the contest for restaurants and cafes of the city was the restaurant White Swan. Many funds were spent on the preparation. And now the kitchen was ready to receive the participants. Everyone was going to allocate their workplace. The very presentation, dessert from the contestants, as well as their tasting by the jury were to take place in the main and most spacious banquet hall of the restaurant. And of course, the cream of society was invited to this event. Sam was shaking nervously at the mere thought of participating in all this, and he wondered 100 times a day whether it would be better to give it all up. But the boss's promise had already been made, and Sam's name was on the list of competing chefs representing their establishments. So the fact of the matter was that all we had to do was accept it. But that didn't stop me from being nervous. "Benjamin, excuse me, are you busy?" Emily slipped into the office. This day, Keezer's was closed to the public for the reason that there were workers working in the hall. Finally, it was decided to replace the light fixtures on the ceiling, as well as update it in general with decorative elements. To Benjamin's taste, however, it was unnecessary. After all, who goes to the cafe in the dining room to admire the ceiling? But since his wife insisted, he didn't mind giving in to her. Workers were hard at work in the hall. Chief Gennady remained in the institution. He'd volunteered to help keep an eye on the place. And Benjamin was getting ready. Today was the day, the pastry contest. He'd been so busy lately, he wasn't glad he'd gotten involved. And now he'd missed the first opening act of the event. Vanessa, who had wanted to go there, certainly together, had been patient with him and nervous. And he could even understand why. Because even though they had talked about everything thoroughly, and she seemed to believe that nothing had happened with Nancy, there was still some tension between them. And now they were almost fighting. In the end, Vanessa said all right, so be it. She would go alone without her husband, even though it was such an important event. She left and told him to hurry up. "Actually, I was just leaving," Benjamin said, turning away from the table where he was stacking the business papers he had to deal with tomorrow. "Emily, it's not a work day, is it? What do you want?" "I know about the schedule. We're rearranging it again." It wasn't work that sang out. She came closer, and Benjamin stared at her perplexed. "You see, I was going to confess to you. I was going to label you a beauty, who today wore her most seductive mini dress under her jacket, which was more like a sweater in length." And Emily, closely approaching Benjamin, talked about how spectacular, imposing man he is and how his powerful male energy is simply impossible to resist. "I'm ready for anything," she said in a voice that she thought sounded incredibly seductive, and bit her lip. "Just tell me to do it." Emily. Benjamin, who was literally sandwiched between the insolent girl and his desk, a little panicked. He'd never had an adventure like this before. "What are you doing?" "You're old enough to be my daughter." She replied that age is not important, and that she only dreams that an experienced, solid man will guide her and support her financially. So you, Benjamin, couldn't believe your ears. The thing was, he knew Alina's parents a little bit. They were decent people. And he couldn't believe their daughter could behave so ugly. "Do you want to be my kept woman?" "Oh yes," exhaled Emily, rolled her eyes and pitched forward, now actually falling on Benjamin. And it was at that moment that the door to the study fell open and Vanessa walked in. She had come back because she had decided no, she could only go to such an important event with her beloved husband, her hope and support, without whose support Keezer would not exist at all. Vanessa had been thinking a lot in the last few days. She and Benjamin had overcome so much together for so long, and she realized she was ready to believe him after all. And Vanessa was going to tell him all that now. But now she felt like the room had run out of air. Her knees weakened. She was just shocked to see him with that girl. "Ah, so that's how you are then," Vanessa exclaimed to the kept woman. "Well, that's to be expected, right?" Benjamin's favorite Benjamin pushed Emily away from her. "It's not what you think it is." Ah, that's how Vanessa squinted her eyes dangerously and swung angrily at him with her purse. Typical male excuse. "How are you?" "It's because she is." She looked at her rival squeamishly, and yet with fear. "You decided not just to cheat on me. You're tired of having an inferior wife. You decided to have a baby on the side. I hate you." There were tears in her eyes, but Vanessa did not allow herself to develop. "That's it. You can do whatever you want. But today is a very important day for Caesar, and you're not going to ruin it for me." Having said that, Vanessa ran out of the office, ran through the hall, almost carrying a stepladder on which one of the workers was standing, and then ran out of the establishment. "What a fool you are." With squeamish regret, Benjamin looked at Emily. "You're fired." And he rushed after his wife. Emily pressed her lips together. This had not turned out the way she wanted it to. And she hadn't thought about the fact that this guy might even tell her parents. If he thought of such a thing. Emily sighed, cleaned herself up, and looking proudly in front of her, left the office. The girl was cautiously late. She heard a response. And the next moment she had already sown a large bucket of paint, which flooded her new suede boots. And then with chagrin and all, Emily just cried. Sam looked down at his hands and also at the table where the ingredients lay, ready to be transformed into a magnificent dessert. And how scared was he? He was surrounded by professionals, pastry geniuses. What's he doing here anyway? He's a simple kid from an orphanage who doesn't even work in an elite restaurant, but in a cafeteria canteen. Sam thought for a long time about what to surprise the sophisticated public. He went through a lot of complicated dessert recipes, each of which could safely be called a work of confectionery art. But then he suddenly remembered the main condition of the contest was to prepare a dessert that the chef thought was the best. That is, that he personally thought was the best. And such a dessert was on Sam's mind. He tasted it for the first time in an orphanage. There worked one teacher. Her name was Nina, and she was a kind, but unfortunately childless woman who, not knowing the joys of motherhood, decided to devote herself to the care of poor children who were left without family warmth. And sometimes she treated the pupils to what she knew how to cook best: apple pie. Sam, like many orphans, adored candy, chocolate, and all kinds of sweets from the store. But nothing could compare to this pie with apples. And then, when he graduated from the orphanage, he continued to correspond, to call this nice woman. They maintained friendly relations, and he also asked her for the recipe for that apple pie. So he decided now, why not make it after all? The choice of recipe is his decision, and that's the only way the contest rules. And the fact that he's not as exquisitely refined as others, that's not his problem. He'll just make the dessert he thinks is best. But Sam decided to add a little something of his own, yes. Sam kept the same apple pie at the heart of the cloudy charlotte, with apple slices stacked on the bottom of the mold. But he complicated the recipe by adding hazelnuts and a little honey to the apple. And finally, to somehow decorate the dessert, Sam decided not only to sprinkle the finished pie with powdered sugar, but also to serve it with whipped cream. And once again in his mind, repeating all the steps, Sam resolutely set to work. Now his nothingness, even if an angry tiger suddenly appeared in the kitchen, could not distract Mom. "Thank you so much," Kate thanked him again. Nancy had made some useful connections over the years, and it was one of those connections that allowed her to get 2 invitations to this contest. But Nancy wasn't interested in that sort of thing. And she came here, of course, because her daughter wanted her to. She wanted to support the boy she was in love with. And on this occasion, by the way, Nancy decided to waive her own rules about not giving her daughter money. And together with her went to the store, where she paid for a very smartly colored holiday dress for the kitten. And now they were among the guests. "Mom, there are such delicious pills." And chocolate-covered strawberries. Kate had one bad domestic habit. She often tried to carry more in her hands than she could carry. She'd gotten caught a couple times at work, when she'd taken an order and instead of going to the kitchen to get it, she'd loaded one tray twice at a time. As a result, it flew to the floor, but after she was reprimanded in front of the whole team and deducted the cost of missing dishes from the salary, Kate did not do so. But now for some reason again did so a girl hurried to her mother with a tray of delicious, and there were glasses of alcoholic fruit, cocktails, and when it was necessary to warm up. Kate failed to perform this maneuver, and as a result the contents under the nose flew on the floor and partially on the costume of this man. "Oops, sorry." Kate was jumping around the injured man, offering paper napkins. Kate's daughter. "How could you not be so neat?" "I apologize for her too." Nancy showed up. "It's not worth the trouble." "Mademoiselle," Madame answered them in a strong foreign accent. A man. He looked to be about 45 years old. Black hair with a noble gray at the temples. A neat beard and mustache. Shrewd gray eyes and strong-willed facial features. He was dressed in a Kremlin and suit with a mottled silk tie, and in tone with it a silk handkerchief in his jacket pocket. And now on the light-colored fabric of the suit, with no glassy stains, blurred traces of the thick sauce based on cream cheese and tomatoes, which earlier had been crabbed in their baskets. "I guess it's not so terrible," the man smiled, rejecting the offer to wash it all immediately. "Really, ladies, I'm not worth your concern. I've had worse things happen to me. My hotel is almost an hour away, and I don't want to miss a minute of what's going to happen here." So he threw up his hands. "Let's just consider it an eventuality, the usual course of life. May I?" He pointed with his hand to the stage from which the contest organizers had already announced something important. "I apologize, but I must leave you. I need to say a few words too." "Who's that? Don't you know?" Nancy casually asked thoughtfully as the man withdrew. It was very strange, but she suddenly felt something inexplicable. It wasn't like the silly romantic interest that had come over her when she'd met those other men, the ones she dreaded to think about now. "I don't know," Kate shrugged, "but he looks French. Your daughter was right to join the conversation. One of the guests of the evening is a lady in years in a black floor-length evening dress and a fur cape on her shoulders. His name is Antoine de Father. He is a legendary restaurant critic who has traveled the world to tell true foodies what is worthy of attention." The lady sighed admiringly. "It's a pity he's about to end his career now." "Really? Why?" Kate asked. "You see," the lady said eagerly, "Antoine started out as a chef and only then changed his trade. Now he intends to open a French restaurant. Yes, by the way, let you not be deceived by his name and excellent knowledge of this language, although he was born in Paris, but his mother was from the USA. And now he has decided to return to his roots. Came to us to travel and choose where to settle down. But he's a special guest of honor here, and it's even scary to imagine how much the organizers of all this paid for him to agree to take part in the jury and to give his opinion of the contestants. And if he speaks badly of Sam, I don't know what I'll do to him," Kate muttered. "Vanessa, we need to talk." Benjamin was beginning to feel like he was out in the desert chasing circulation. Because ever since they'd come here, his wife had been slipping away from him. And while he could understand her, who would enjoy catching their other half in such an ambiguous situation? But right now, he still couldn't understand why she just couldn't stop and let him explain himself, as he had already done when she had caught him in Nancy's illusorily compromising society. Finally, he caught up with her. Vanessa stopped at one of the Greek-style columns, which in this room served more as decorative elements than actual supports. Vanessa stood with her arms folded across her chest. "What do you want to talk about? Divorce? What? Honey, come on." Benjamin dropped his hands doomfully. He was ready to talk, but he counted on a calm, sober dialogue, not a monologue from his own side, in which all the words would be as if into the wall and bounce off the stubborn negative mood of the wife, her desire to close and her far-fetched resentment. "Tell me how long this has been going on." But there was nothing, Benjamin replied. He looked her straight in the eye, and would have given anything in the world, it seemed, just so she could read in his eyes the confirmation that he wasn't lying. The first time was Nancy. "We met as friends, talked. She asked, said she wanted to talk to you too, but later. Remember what kind of friends we were? There was no other company like us at school back then. You see, Nancy, she was just afraid you'd take it the wrong way." So Vanessa feared correctly and looked away defiantly, but immediately turned her face back to him. "Okay, that's taken care of. Are you just friends with this Elena too?" "No," Benjamin shook his head. "But I could swear on anything you say that I didn't give her any reason to behave that way. But you yourself know that the other waitresses, the staff in general, have been complaining a little about her. That she's been acting a little too loose with the guests, like she's flirting with some of the men. We didn't pay attention to it, of course, but I think I know what she wanted. The other waitresses used to say that Emily dreamed of finding a rich husband and any patron at all. Quick, Vanessa grinned bitterly, so she decided to go for it. What a girl her lips can be. A smile touched her lips for the first time since the quarrel. And it put hope in Benjamin's heart, so she started it first. And you were just confused, but you were getting ready to fight back. When I came in like that, yes, it was like that, Benjamin exhaled. Vanessa, I can't prove to you that I'm not lying. All I can do is to be as honest with you as I have always been with you. And then it's up to you. But I love you, and I don't want any other woman in the whole world. Even if Vanessa had a hard time drowning, I can't bear you a child, Emily, or some other young girl. They could. You be a father. You know, a long time ago, when I was a kid, Benjamin said, I used to dream that I was a bird, and when I woke up, I felt so disappointed. I thought it was so unfair. But then I realized that not having wings is just part of life, part of the world I exist in. It's the same with fatherhood. I won't hide it. I've wished for it, and I continue to wish for it, and probably will for the rest of my life. But that doesn't mean I can give up on you. You're my favorite woman. You're my other half, Benjamin practically whispered. And that's the most important thing to me. Nancy had already prepared many words of reconciliation, but now they all seemed shallow and inappropriate for some reason. And so, taking her husband's hand and meeting his gaze, she said just a few words. I believe you and thank you for being with me. Sam hasn't felt so insecure since. What was there to say? He had never felt so insecure in his life. What was I gonna do? I had to go on stage. This was what all the contestants were supposed to do, where they briefly talked about the institutions they represented and the visas they had chosen for the competition. Teasers can't be called an extra-class establishment, Sam said of his place of business after announcing that he had made an apple pie. We don't have any celebrities coming in, whose autograph you can hang on the wall, and we don't do branded dishes. Our menus are designed a season in advance. We do not have banquet halls, and to us, I admit, do not go on romantic dates or celebrate birthdays and other holidays. But we do appreciate each and every one of our customers. They are so different. There are a lot of regulars. For example, we have a factory worker who comes to us. He's a father of 3 kids. He always takes 2 meat dishes from us. Can you imagine? But he never takes sweets. He says he can't eat a bite. If one eats at all, he won't share it with the kids. Such an amazing person. And Grandma Zina also comes to visit us. She's very old with a stick, but she shows up at our house regularly. How does she get her pension? She always asks the waitress to calculate in advance how much it will cost to eat. She speaks very cordial. She reminds us how in my youth as a girl I used to visit the canteen at the factory. And we always give her a cup of tea as a gift from the institution, and a spoon or a sweet bun to it. We say it's for all regular customers, so she believes us. That's the kind of place we have. In general, I realize with my mind that I don't feel quite at ease here. Sam waved his hands, paused, and sympathetic laughter rang through the hall, but mostly without malice or snide remarks. And actually, I wouldn't risk participating. Yeah, well, my bosses sent me, so I'll give it a shot. And from here on out, let it be what it will be. And he left the stage. The exciting and most important moment came. Now the desserts were brought out one by one. Some, like Sam's apple pie, could be cut into slices, and others, if they were portioned, were made in several pieces at once. And now the desserts were on the tables. The audience froze. And the judges were concentrating on savoring the best delicacies from the city's top establishments. Hi, Sam said. He, noticing Kate in the hall, approached her. Hi, said the girl and introduced him to her mom. Are you nervous? Asked Kate. No, Sam sighed. The main thing is not to win, but to participate. I'll gain experience and all that. And it's great. I'll brag about participating in such a contest. Why are you talking like you're not going to win? Pearl's got his hands up his sides. Kate, you can do it. If what you wish for could come true? Sam grinned. But thanks for the moral support. Finally, the objects of evaluation by the elite jury were eaten, and the secret voting began, after which the host took the stage. Today here were presented luxurious dishes, colorful and extraordinary, each of which, I'm not afraid to say it, could decorate the menu of any restaurant. But we, unfortunately, must choose only one, the best. And you know, when we just started voting, no one doubted, grinned the host. Who will win? A delicious chocolate fountain. It intertwines the classic traditions of this dessert and its original reading. An author's perspective. We all agreed that this would have been a fair choice on all counts, Well, that's what I thought. Sam lowered his gaze. Yeah, I'm not upset, he said to the wall, already ready to comfort him in every way possible. It's okay. That tough cook should win. But the next moment, when the presenter continued talking, Sam suddenly looked up at the stage in amazement. And the thing was that the host said that yes, the experienced jury members appreciated all the desserts, but there was one among them that impressed them especially, and it was a simple apple charlotte. I think many of us are familiar with this simple pie, which was prepared by our mothers, grandmothers, and aunts, said the host with a smile. It seems that every piece of it warmly resonates in the heart, and so we decided. We were going to judge the dessert fairly after all, which meant we had to take another vote. And so finally, the decision was almost made. The host paused for a spectacular pause and looked around at the breathless audience. Our guest of honor pondered the longest, our dear Antoine. Finally, he made his decision. And in the end, first place is awarded to apple pie. From Sam from Feasers. There was a round of applause and cheers. Sam rounded into a confused stare. Was this really happening to him? But go ahead. I gave him a gentle nudge in the back. Kate, did you deserve that? This is your victory. Let's go for it. Sam went on stage and accepted from the hands of the presenter the award of a gilded plate with a crystal actor, as well as a diploma and another check for a tidy sum as another prize. And now the guy truly realized that this was the happiest evening of his entire past, and so far, his life. And then he looked around the room and stopped at the picture. And suddenly he realized something important. And besides, we expect to cooperate, said the host and owner of the White Swan restaurant, smiling. And although it is not included in the rules of the contest, but I want to make you, Sam, special offers. How about selling this wonderful recipe? It could become the centerpiece of our establishment, a part of the list of dishes that make up, so to speak, its business card. That's a very generous offer, Sam replied. But I don't agree. First of all, I really hope this recipe shows up in Keezers. I think our guests will love it. And secondly, I'm thinking of recording a video of it and putting it online. Let people cook it. Let it be not only in the Café This Pie, but in every kitchen of those who want it. So you can write down the recipe. Shout it out from the audience. Some spectacular blonde in a red dress. How lovely, she continued. An attractive man who can cook. How can you resist? She joked and laughed. Finally, Sam was released from the stage. He received congratulations from all sides, including from the other contestants. And then he stayed a little longer at the celebration. It was necessary purely out of courtesy to talk to so many people. So Sam was not immediately able to approach the wall, and when he did, the girl met him with a frown. Congratulations, she muttered. You're a hot commodity, aren't you? She added sharply, clearly implying that he had just been chatting with a lady owner of a pastry shop, who all coquettishly unobtrusive, and yet eloquently touched Sam, and clearly not jokingly asked for lessons in culinary skills, and also beckoned them to work. Yes, what a glory, Sam grinned. All right, squinted Kate. I'll go. Where to? The guy was surprised. Did I do something to offend you? No, it's all right, the girl answered so sharply that anyone would have realized that nothing was wrong with her. Wait a minute. Sam still wanted to say something important, but Kate ran away to the depths of the hall. And then, finding her mom there, told her that she wanted to go home because she had a headache. The next few days passed for Sam in a pleasant fog. He was still reliving the aftertaste of his victory, but there was something else that kept him busy, and he decided he had to act. Hi, Kate said to him as she opened the door. It didn't surprise her that he knew her address. I invited him to visit once, but Sam declined. What's up? Did something happen at work? No, he answered and handed her a bouquet of pink rose lollipops. These are for you, cute, Kate said, and she looked like she'd been given a mop instead of flowers. Not for nothing. I hate flowers. Liar, Sam grinned. Roses are your favorite. You said so yourself. All right, come on in. The girl stepped aside, letting him through. Since you're here, we need to talk. Yeah, we've talked 100 times. Kate's going to get some water in a vase. What do you want? You know what I mean? No. Look, if I don't want to, I love you. How did she not drop the vase too? Her hands were weak as soon as she heard the cherished words, but instead she put the vase neatly on the table. Then she put the bouquet in it. And only then did she step toward the guy. She stood up and raised her head, meeting his gaze. Say it again. I said I love you for real. How else could you say it? For a few minutes, they just stared at each other. Then Kate laughed happily and threw herself around his neck. I also want you to marry me, Sam added. You're quick. She smiled and kissed him for the first time herself. They would have said 1,000 more important words to each other. But at that moment, the doorbell rang. Kate, opening the door and seeing her mom, hurried to share her joy. Mom, I'm getting married. Oh, that's all I could do. To begin with, Nancy said, walking into the house. Standing behind her were Kate's grandparents. And here was someone else she hadn't expected to be here at all. Antoine, Grandpa said sweetly. Just like that, out of the house for a little while. I don't know what's going on here. Who are you marrying? That's him. Kate grabbed her hand, looked out of the room, indignant. Sam, I told you about him. I'm very happy for you, daughter, Nancy said. That's just wonderful. Mom asked Kate, what's wrong? Are you different? Let me get this straight. Mademoiselle. Antoine stepped forward, and in the next few minutes it became clear that love at first sight had broken out between him and Nancy, and with such force that Antoine, having lived as a bachelor for the last almost 20 years, he suddenly decided not only to have an affair, but to marry Nancy. He gave her a diamond ring, and also to be serious and solid. Has already managed to get acquainted with her parents, and they approved such a candidate for a future son-in-law. Besides, Antoine decided that if he found a bride here, he would settle down in this town too. And here, as planned, we'll open a restaurant. That's great news for one day. That's right. Maybe my future son-in-law will even work in our family restaurant one day. What do you think? Sam was a little confused. He replied that he would think about it later. But for now, he was just happy. And he still had a lot to talk about with the cute picture. Benjamin, I don't think we can do this, Vanessa said. They'd just gone over the estimates they prepared, and the pile of paperwork needed to open a second Caesar's Cafe for the umpteenth time. I remember when we started, you said the same thing, grinned her husband. Don't worry, we'll make it work. All right, Vanessa sighed. I trust you. They were silent for a while, immersed in studying the documentation. Benjamin, we need to talk, and this can't wait. He rubbed his eyes tiredly with his fingers. It would be good to get it done today. We have to pick a place to rent tomorrow. Since when is work more important to you than your wife and family? Vanessa frowned. Benjamin blinks confusedly. Honey, are you offended? It's just that this is important to you and me. And no, of course, it's not more important to me. But just tell me what's going on. You haven't been the same lately. What's the same, but a little cranky? He grinned at Archie. Do you have a lot of mood swings? You used to be a whirlwind, but now you're tired all the time. I'm already worried. Are you sick? No, I'm healthy, Vanessa replied. But something is really going on with me. But I didn't know how to talk to you about it. I thought we trusted each other. You just told me yourself. So what's going on with you? Remember when you said that all change has its time, and sometimes something new can hurt? I remember, Benjamin nodded. That's what I said when you offered to buy a cottage. But you see, you and I don't have enough time for it, and it will be overgrown with weeds. Benjamin, I didn't mean the cottage. Vanessa started pacing nervously around the room. Then she stopped and either laughed or sobbed. I just don't know how to tell you to believe it. But I've been to several doctors already, and they confirmed it. Doctors? So you were sick after all? Benjamin jumped up, walked over to his wife, and wrapped his arms around her. We'll get through this. Trust me. Of course we will. Quietly poked Vanessa. In about 7 months. Why is Benjamin confused about 7 months? What are you talking about? How confused are you? But think about it. Vanessa lowered her eyes. It's just that I've been pregnant for 2 months. So that makes it 7 more to go. Pregnant. Benjamin could hardly believe his ears. But we were told. The doctor said that sometimes there are changes in a person's body. Well, it was a small possibility. But it did happen. Benjamin, aren't you glad? I forgive you for saying mean things about me. It's just that you're pregnant and therefore a little nervous. He hugged her even tighter and kissed her. No, I'm glad. I'm happy. This is the most wonderful thing that could have happened to us.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Lisa did not like to be late for such grand events as the student party. But at the last moment, when she was ready to jump out the door, her mother held her back. Wendy considered it her sacred duty to have a talk with her before each outing. This obligatory part consisted of several recommendations, which Lisa had to listen to carefully and then absorb. Wendy said in a ministerial tone, "Where are you going?" Lisa thought doomfully, That's it. Now the educational work will begin." But out loud she said, "Mommy, I warned you 2 days ago that tonight we have a theme night. In honor of Valentine's Day, there will be a disco concert program and other nice things." The girl started to grab the doorknob, but her mother stopped her with a shout. "Wait, I understand everything, except one thing. Why did you say that as if you were going not to a cultural event, but to a pub? How many times have I told you not to water that skirt? It pulls your ass in obscenely. Mom, everybody wears skirts like that today. You too, at one time wore what was considered fashionable. That suit Daddy and I gave you will fit you better. And as far as fashion goes, I'll tell you one thing, we didn't wear that kind of gaudy stuff. You cannot spit on yourself what does not suit you such her liver, as now you can afford a tall girl with impeccably straight legs, and you're not doing so well in that regard." The mother slid an appraising glance at her daughter's figure, and after that, she herself took off from her shoulders a fur coat, frivolous pink color. "Go change. I'll wait." Lisa could hardly hold back tears of despair, but it was useless to argue with her mother. What hurt her most was that Wendy had so unapologetically reminded her daughter of her defects. It was true that Lisa's legs were a little out of alignment at the knees, but this flaw was only noticeable on close inspection. The girl muttered under her breath so that her mother could hear her remark. "Any mother supports her child, and you always try to humiliate me." Wendy already more peacefully noticed, not grumbling. "And thank me later. You can thank me later for the lessons in good taste. You are already 18, and it's time to decide on a style that maximally corresponds to your inner content. After all, this is the secret of a harmonious image of any self-respecting woman." Wendy still long spread on this hot topic, and Lisa in her room tried to pull a suit over the clothes, which greatly annoyed her mother. This disguise technique Lisa had to use frequently as such clashes with her mother occurred regularly. The operation went well, and she adjusted her hair in front of the mirror just in case she wanted to see if she could get her hands on my hair. Lisa ran out into the hallway and froze under her mother's gaze. But Wendy was pleased with her appearance this time. "This is different. Couldn't you have dressed like that in the first place? A nice suit that suits you. You've turned into something else, haven't you? Run along, or I'll be late for my party." Knowing her mother's temper, Lisa had thoughtfully packed a pair of mind-blowing shoes. Wendy didn't even realize her daughter had a fashionable pair of shoes. This hit the girl bought with the money that her grandfather allocated her on the occasion of her majority. At the thought of Trevor, it warmed her heart, but there was no time to be distracted by sentimental moments and put on a fur coat. The girl finally left the apartment unhindered. Immediately from the entrance, she turned on the 4th speed and ran to the administrative building of the medical college, where she studied, but fast movement was hampered by icy ice, and she twice almost fell. Despite her speedy way of traveling, the girl was late for the start of the event. The festival was already in full swing, and she hastily changed her boots for fashionable shoes and hurried to the top, where young people were having a good time. The music was blaring at full blast. The high society made it impossible to focus on one thing at a time. Lisa stood at the entrance for a long time, trying to find at least one familiar face among the dancers. Suddenly, someone took her by the arm and pulled her to the center of the room. Lisa looked up and saw Max's smiling face. "Hi. Where have you been? I waited for you at the entrance for half an hour, and then I thought you weren't coming." The girls, as loud as her buddies, screamed at me. My mom held me up. "She's worse than any probation worker I've ever had. Why were you expecting me? I don't remember you making a date with me." Max was just nodding his head or something. Whether he was agreeing with her, or is it the rhythmic movements adding to the background music? All pretty girls have memory problems. When we crossed paths in the cafeteria yesterday, I told you I wanted to go out with you. Lisa couldn't remember the incident and remained silent. She tried to catch the rhythm of the moving dance, but she was hindered by her partner's gaze. Max moved beautifully and still had time to look at the girl brazenly. But even that was not enough for him. And after a few minutes of contemplation of his partner, he roughly attracted her to him and whispered hotly in her ear, "Listen, you so suits this strict costume in the style of Mary Poppins. You look so cute in it, and I'm just wearing a vest." It was only now that Lisa realized that she hadn't had time to take off the costume, which was hiding another outfit underneath. She didn't even want to imagine how Max would have reacted to that provocative outfit. A thought flashed through her mind. Her mom was right about thinking before putting on an outfit that was too revealing. Several times the girl tried to slip away from her overly insistent partner, but Max wouldn't let go of her hand. One popular track was replaced by another, and she had to dance. But most of all, the girl was embarrassed by her beau's vulgarities and compliments. He constantly whispered in her ear something that made her blush. But the young man regarded this as the girl's readiness to continue to get closer. When the DJ announced a short break, Max looked his partner intently in the eye and smirked cheekily. He asked Lisa, "How would you like to continue the evening somewhere in the United States? After all, it's Valentine's Day." Without waiting for a positive answer, Max put his arm around her waist and tried to kiss her. But Lisa pulled away abruptly. "Max, you're wasting your eloquence on me. While you have time, look for another girl. I'm sure there will be someone who will gladly accept your proposal." The young man did not want to admit his defeat and asked loudly enough that you break. "All you build yourself up, and yourself, probably, only thinking how to get off with a guy like me. Max, you think too highly of yourself. And besides, I'm not really into that kind of cocky." It was, as they say, a college thing. Level 80 bummer. The quiet whispering turned to loud talking, and a couple more started to pay attention to the argument. Lisa wanted to leave quietly, but humiliated by her refusal. Max did not want to let the girl go. One more minute, and a light verbal altercation would have turned into a conflict. But the situation was saved by the timely appearance of Betty. Lisa's friend had a unique ability. She could assess the situation at a glance. Now she also turned on her intuition and realized that the situation would not be resolved without her intervention. Betty grabbed Lisa's arm. "Where are you? I've been looking for you for an hour. We're all here. Come on, let's go." Betty dragged her friend to the other end of the hall, and the classmates began to greet Lisa with cheers from afar. The unpleasant residue from her interaction with Max quickly disappeared, and the girl never once looked in the direction where the rejected admirer had remained. In the circle of her friends, she felt completely safe. But this environment was also nice in that there was Rod within a stone's throw of her. Lisa liked this tall guy with unremarkable looks. Rod was studying to be a dental technician, but he often dropped in on them. Many people thought that these visits were related to Lola, who was considered the first beauty in their group. Lisa was also sure of this version and tried to come to terms with the idea that the guy she liked had chosen another girl. She even now tried to find among the familiar faces a recognized beauty. But alas, she was nowhere to be seen. From Betty did not escape her friend's confusion. She informed her in a whisper of recent events. "If you're trying to find the needle, you're trying in vain. Our queen has warmed up the student party, and even at the beginning of the event left with some major in a cool car. So seize the day." Lisa also whispered to her friend Betty, "Please, no innuendos. You know very well that I am not one of those who act like a hyena. And if I were you, I'd forget my principles. Rob's a good guy, not like his brother. Who do you mean? That bastard I saved you from 5 minutes ago. I didn't know Max was Rob's brother. I just found out. They're not siblings, they're cousins. And as far as I know, they don't get along very well. Lisa didn't pay much attention to this news. She never supported the habit of some girlfriends to discuss other people's family problems. She had enough to do in her own family nest. Just fighting with her mother took energy and nerves, and Lisa was also responsible for her grandfather's welfare. However, Trevor's care was more of a pleasure than a nuisance. In the company of peers of the girl did not want to think about sad things, and the rest of the evening passed cheerfully and interestingly. When the event was over, the students all pile and noise, and songs to the guitar fell out into the street. For about an hour they wandered around the city center and the townspeople or popular songs about love. Then everyone slowly began to disperse. Rob volunteered to escort Lisa out. I don't know your exact address, but they say the neighborhood where you live isn't exactly peaceful, so I'm just gonna have to walk you out. If you don't mind, of course. Rob looked at Lisa and his eyes danced off the typewriter. The girl smiled too. This is the first time I've heard that I live in a creepy place. I even got scared, and I gladly accept your offer. They walked leisurely along the snowy streets and chatted about nothing. Suddenly, Max blocked their way. With his usual swagger, he began to reproach his brother. This meeting, I wondered who dared to steal my girlfriend. Turns out it was you, little brother. Rob cut him off. Max, stop making a fool of yourself. You have a bad habit of making a circus in public places. You got a bad habit of getting in my way too. Well, I won't spoil your evening. We'll talk about manners later. Max abruptly made a full turn, but slipped and almost fell. Everyone is against me today. Having a bad day, Yu looked at his brother once more, then at Lisa, and whistled. The familiar motif disappeared into the alley. Rob felt embarrassed in front of the girl because of his brother's ugly act. Don't mind him. There's a saying about a child without an eye for a reason. Max never used to make such a pass at me. We were even good friends for a while, but then he was replaced. That's why I try to stay away from him. Our mothers rarely talk to each other anymore either. It's been a black cat for a long time. If they meet now, it's only at the funerals of their closest relatives. Lisa realized that her comments in this situation were unnecessary. She kept silent the rest of the way. They said goodbye warmly at the entrance of her house, without making any arrangements for a future meeting. But the next day, Rob showed up at their building during a big break. Lisa spotted him as she hurried to her lecture. The girl nodded a greeting and wanted to go on her way, but Rob asked her to stick around. Lisa, we didn't break up very well last night. Why don't we go out tonight? Or go to the movies? The girl's heart was racing, but she tried not to show her excitement. We could go out. I just have to be sure to show up at home. Rob smiled. Strict control. Sort of. My mom tracks my every move and thinks it's the right thing to do. Good. Chuckles. We'll keep your mother's best interests in mind. Meet me at 6:00 p.m. all right. Lola walked past, head held high, but she didn't even dignify the guy who had been eyeing her for so long. But Lisa bumped into her in the doorway of the auditorium. Lola saw her rival with a glare and remarked sneeringly that she had already picked her up before I could throw it. In principle, I don't mind. You can use it. Guys like Rob are not my type. Lisa didn't even take offense at her classmate, because she knew that she had only clothes and entertainment on her mind. Betty, as always, saw and heard everything. She looked disapprovingly at the bun and said very loudly, "There are some people in our ranks who happen to be used to categorizing people, and I think that such specialists should not be allowed near the sick." But the mare with skin and on her this remark did not affect. Not a single muscle on the doll-like girl's face, and only the cold blue eyes glared defiantly at Betty. "And if that's a pebble in my garden, you're trying in vain. Because I'm not much affected by such moral lessons. Yes, I'm really not going to carry around a duck or an enema." That's a pleasure I'll leave to the likes of you. Betty, your name's good, but the rest of it doesn't fit. After a brief pause for convincing, she shared her plans with the same arrogance. You girls are so primitive, and I truly sympathize. After all, unlike you, I will be working in a place that you dare not even dream of. Lola gave Betty another glance, then looked at Lisa. Keep in mind, any minute I could blow the whistle, and the dog would come running after me. Her rival wanted to take a jab at Lisa, but she pretended not to hear her last words. All the girls' thoughts were centered around her upcoming date with Rob, and she didn't even catch the essence of the lecture. Every day the smell of spring was more and more palpable in the air. This incomparable aroma stirred the imagination and made young hearts beat more often, students of the final year of medical college. Neither were strangers to such excitement. Most of the girls sat in the lectures with absent looks, and the teacher tried to get through to their minds. Molly talked monotonously about the high purpose of nursing. A nurse was and remains the main assistant of a doctor. And you, my dears, should understand what responsibility will soon fall on your shoulders. Unfortunately, this understanding sometimes comes late. For example, now you are sitting on your mind somewhere very far away. And then, when new personnel come to the workplace, there is an anecdotal situation when one young specialist knows how to put an enema and the other where to put it. And this is not an anecdotal case at all. Molly knew how to keep the attention of the audience, and after her words, all those who were in the clouds returned to the ground. Laughter spread through the audience. One of the girls even dared to add to the collection of cool flavors of young doctors. Molly, that joke is long out of date. If you'd like a more recent one. One of your students recently surprised the entire medical community. It happened during internship in one of our city clinics, when the post nurse asked to collect tests in one of the wards of the department. The trainee, not thinking long, grabbed a basin and went to the specified ward. The thing is that all the men in the ward were subject to examination, and the girl decided to collect biological fluid from them in bulk. There was a peal of laughter in the classroom. Lola jumped out of the classroom with the words, "You are all assholes, and I hate you all. Are you laughing? Are you laughing?" While we have the chance, Molly urged everyone to calm the girl down. An unpleasant story can happen to anyone. That's why you shouldn't take your fellow man's blunder to ridicule. Perhaps the nurse incorrectly explained the task to the trainee. The teacher interrupted the girl who had previously told the blunders. In vain you, Molly, Lola are defending. The reason for her frequent ups and downs is that she does not think it necessary to look at least occasionally in textbooks. And then these specialists go into hospitals and treat patients. I think the problem of low qualification of novice specialists is very relevant today. By the way, it fits perfectly into the framework of your lecture. I do not want to humiliate anyone here. It's just a shame, so to speak, for the honor of the uniform. Molly had to admit that the student was right, and I dare to bring up the student's mishap. Betty, said Lisa in a low voice. Can you imagine what will start tomorrow at our college? Lisa was intrigued by this phrase of her friend. I think the tick will dig up on Mila. I don't think, I'm sure. Do you know who Lola's dad is? No, I'm not interested in knowing. And you should. Her mom works at the Ministry of Education, and her dad runs the entire pharmacology department. Such smart people have such a clueless daughter. It's a sad fact, of course. But I truly feel sorry for our Molly. She's really one of the best teachers. The girls were still cracking up a little on extraneous topics because the brain refused to perceive such serious material as the basics of the sister case. Barely the bell rang, the future medics flocked and shoved out of the classroom. Betty pushed her friend to the side and pointed her hand toward the hall. Look already, and poured her resentment into the first returning vest. Lisa turned to the side where she did not look away, watching the girlfriend, and saw Max comforting Lola. This touching scene made no impression on her. But Betty, with a sneer, said, You don't know they're dating. No, I'm not interested. Right? Why would you look in other people's windows when there's a light shining in your own? Did I almost forget that you and Ra are having an affair? Honestly, I envy you. Lisa winked playfully at her friend. Like you don't have a date. Don't join me. And anyway, I think it's a little early for us to think about a serious relationship. Personally, I'm going to continue my studies in the near future. My dream is to become a doctor. I like endocrinology. Betty rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh no, I've had enough of studying. I've listened to enough brainwashing for 2 years. My main concern right now is getting my internship published. Betty stopped the class at half a word and looked at her friend expressively. Speaking of birds, do you know where we're going to be sent to do our hours? Lisa shrugged her shoulders, which meant she was indifferent to the question. Yes, I don't really care, but I've heard that our course assigns emergency hospitals and city clinics. It's not unusual. They do it every year. It'd be nice if they did. I heard some of the kids are going to be sent to the countryside. Relax, that's only for paramedics and dentists. By the way, Rob was also sent to the district hospital. Goldie laughed hilariously. And what will a budding dental technician do there? Get his hands on designing statutory jaws for old people. You're holding it in for nothing. You have a wrong idea about the people of the hinterland. My grandpa, FYI, lives in a place like this and enjoys our medical care. And last year he got new teeth, even though he spent all his savings on it. But he is satisfied. And the teeth look like real teeth. Now my grandfather eats everything with pleasure. He used to eat nothing but soup and cereal. You're lucky you have someone to visit. I have all my relatives concentrated in one place. It's not even interesting. As all hot topics were exhausted, the girls headed for the locker room. Betty was tidying her hair in front of the mirror and suddenly remembered the stunning news. We've been talking a lot, you and I, and the most important thing slipped my mind. Anyway, in case you didn't know, I'm authorized to tell you that we're planning a graduation celebration. You mean graduation, but that's a long way off. My friend was expertly applying raspberry-flavored gloss to her plump lips. No, that's not what I mean. People want to get together before their internships. After all, for us, the educational process is essentially over, and I'm a little sad. How do you feel about that idea? Positive. But depending on where and when to gather tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow will be known. But we've got a campground in mind. It's not far from the city. Kathy's dad runs it. And when we leave at the beginning of May, everything falls out very well there and the holiday weekend. So we're looking at 3 days of mind-blowing partying. And Kathy's dad promised us the lowest possible rate. Lisa's mood immediately dropped and there was no escaping Betty's gaze. This change. What are you doing? Girlfriend's gone soft. Financial problems. Money's not the problem. It's something else. If it's just for 1 day, it's not a problem. But 3 days is a problem. You know my mom, Lisa, you're not a little girl anymore. Talk to your folks. Seriously, don't let them cut off your oxygen. I'll try, but I'm not sure they'll let me go. See for yourself. Lisa thought Betty was upset with her. She herself had berated herself for being insecure and not being able to stand up for herself. But she couldn't stand up to her parents either. And it wasn't even because she was still completely dependent on them. It was the traditional upbringing. Lisa was used to her father and mother deciding everything important in her life. Lisa was not wrong in her assumptions. As soon as she hinted at a possible trip out of town with a group of fellow students, Wendy immediately cut her off. Don't even think about it. You're not going anywhere. Lisa whimpered. Mom, well, why, I'm an adult, and I have the right to do it myself. I don't deny it. You have the right to do whatever you want. But you, daughter, you don't know what a roller coaster life is. I don't have anything against hanging out with friends, as long as it's an adult-supervised activity. Will you have a teacher with you? I don't know. Gold didn't say anything, but one of our girls' fathers works at the campground. One adult can't handle a whole bunch of right-wing kids. The girl's father, James, did not hear the beginning of the conversation, but caught the main point, decided to intervene. He addressed his wife, Wendy, in a joking tone. Maybe it's time to let your daughter go. I often get the impression that you keep Lisa like a dog on a short leash. The comparison angered the woman. James, don't you think you're hurting our girl even more with that comparison? Imagine what they're going to do on this very campground for 3 days. Wendy, but they're adults. You could say they're ready specialists. And then, we cannot with you, and you cannot guard our daughter for the rest of her life. Such control can have the most dire consequences. Lisa already knew in advance that her mother would be the winner. Her father always gave in to his wife, and he did it for the sake of peace in the family. So she didn't wait for the argument to end and went to bed. To be honest, she herself was not eager to go to unfamiliar places with a bunch of students. If there had been a flu in the company, then it would still be possible to grieve. But the girl's conscience was at ease, for she had made every effort to persuade Wendy. But in the morning, an unheard-of miracle occurred. Her mother herself came to her room and with a puzzled expression on her face said, "Daddy and I talked yesterday and decided that you could go away with your friends. You don't have to fight off the collective." The girl rushed to her mother and squealed with joy, "Mama, you are the best parents in the world. I promise to behave myself." Lisa immediately called Betty to make her friend happy. She had been walking in high spirits all day, but late in the evening, the joy was also suddenly cut short. Just as it came unexpectedly, the daughter received a call from Trevor. Wendy talked to her father for a few minutes and then called her daughter. "Lisa, the idea of you grandfather personally asks." No sooner had the girl picked up the phone from her mother than she heard the old man grumbling unhappily. "Lisa, why have you forgotten your grandfather? I'm sitting here alone in 4 walls, and I don't know what to do with myself." The girl tried to justify herself. "Well, I came 2 weeks ago. So, I was fine then. Now I'm suffering from blood pressure or something else. You're a doctor. You'd have come and diagnosed me correctly." "Okay, Grandpa, I'll come as soon as I get a chance. And you go to the clinic tomorrow. You have good doctors there." Trevor shouted into the phone. "Don't give me advice. I know where to go myself. Tell me, granddaughter, why should I go to hospitals when we have our own doctor in the family?" "Grandpa, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a nurse, and I haven't gotten my diploma yet." "I don't care. Some nurses are smarter than doctors. When I was in the hospital, they had such smart girls working there." Lisa was surprised at her grandfather's assertiveness. Trevor had never allowed himself such methods of influence before. The girl listened to his speech and her mother watched her. Finally, Lisa put the receiver down on the machine. Wendy asked her grandfather. The lady did not even expect such a thing from him. It's not surprising. People change over the years, and our grandfather is 74. That's a very respectable age. What did Mom decide? Why are you asking so many questions? Of course I'm going to Grandpa's house. He's really lonely there. It's his own fault. If it weren't for his bad temper, how many times I've suggested he move to the city. But he won't even hear of it. Mom, there's something I don't know. Tell me, when you go to Grandpa's house, let him tell you his secrets. Believe me, he has so many secrets, you could write a whole book." Until that day, Lisa had never thought that her relatives might have secrets of their own. Her parents had told her a lot about their past. Grandpa liked to share memories too, but all those stories only reflected the part of their lives they were proud of. After her mother's carelessly thrown phrase, the girl realized that there was another part that they themselves did not want to remember. Trevor had a strong character, like any man used to a simple life. After the untimely death of his beloved wife, Miranda, he was left to grow old alone. At first it even suited him, but over the years it became increasingly difficult and dreary to live as a lone wolf. But most of all, he was worried about the thought that he might one day fall asleep and not wake up in his 2-room apartment. He reproached his daughters with this possible scenario. "You have all gone to different cities, and I'm the only one here. God forbid, I'll die. No one will ever know. They'll lie there for a year until the neighbors sound the alarm. Kelly's eldest daughter reacted strongly to such remarks. "Father, we've offered you so many times to move, and Wendy has good conditions. My husband and I have a big house, and we live alone now that the kids are gone. So your claims are unfounded." The old man wasn't going to back down. He was making his main argument. "I don't want to live in your penthouse. I'm used to my apartment." Kelly was shocked at the truth and her guess. "So you're suggesting that one of us drop everything and move in with you?" "Yes, that's exactly the format I'd like, and I don't see any obstacles to its realization." That's when Wendy had to step in. "Daddy, it's okay that my sister and I have husbands and children. A normal husband should be able to understand the difficulties. I'd understand if you were married for the first year, but you've been married for 20 years. Kelly is already a grandmother herself. She could have moved in with her father, and at least give your men a break from you." It was useless to convince the old man that such a mode of life was unnatural. Trevor had not particularly considered the opinion of his girls before, and in his old age he began to ignore their problems, practically the same way he treated his grandchildren. Kelly had 2 sons, but grandfather did not think very highly of them. Every chance he got, he reproached them for not listening to his advice when they were young. When Sam and Anthony were small, the grandfather dreamed that his grandchildren, like himself, would work on the land. Agronomist is a very respected profession. Such specialists are always in demand. You, Sam, would be very well suited for such a job. But you, Anthony, you have a penchant for iron. I've been watching you. You'd make a good mechanic." But the boys disobeyed the oldest of the family. Sam became a lawyer. Anthony chose to become a structural engineer. Trevor was very worried. His daughters heard a lot of unflattering statements on this subject from him. Probably for 5 years, the storm raged in the soul of the old man did not subside. Grandchildren repeatedly tried to establish relations with grandfather, but he did not go to the peace, although gifts from them accepted. After the loss of confidence in the hairs on the male line, the center of love of the old man shifted to Lisa, and the desire of his only granddaughter Lisa to become a nurse finally melted the ice in Trevor's heart. After all, his late wife Miranda also devoted her whole life to medicine. "Well done, Lisa. If your grandmother were alive right now, she'd be very happy. After all, my Miranda was the most respected person in our village. People came to her day and night for help, and she never said no to anyone, except she couldn't keep herself safe. Or is it my fault she left me so soon?" At this point, Trevor usually fell into melancholy, and sometimes he shed a tear. This time his grandfather began with a reminiscence too, but beforehand he issued a series of rebukes. When Lisa rang the doorbell, the old man began to reprimand her from the doorstep. "If I hadn't called, you wouldn't have come at all. Nobody lives in the same skin. The threads from the same cup from which I drink the bitterness of this life." Lisa knew it was best to keep quiet during Trevor's opening speech. She quietly threw off her light cloak, ignoring the grandfathers and lamentations, headed for the kitchen. Checking on the stove, pots, pans, the girl asked, "Food. What should I cook? Do you have groceries? Or should I run to the store?" Trevor immediately switched to a more pleasant topic. "Further, if you do not bother to go to the store, buy there something at your discretion for a long time, and the real soup did not eat something. If memory serves me correctly, you're under Nina's supervision." An old man, looking down, "Nina doesn't come to me anymore. I sent her away." Lisa looked at her grandfather with all her eyes. "Grandfather, of course, I have no right to lecture you, but you can't do that. You had a woman assigned to you in social services. You kicked her out. Then your buddy's granddaughter took care of you. You said goodbye to her too. Now it's not you who's shown your aunt the door. How are you going to go on living? You can't be so unloved." Trevor listened to my granddaughter, head bowed low, scolding me. I can't help myself. That's the kind of temper I have. All because I'm green with boredom. I wish you'd move in with me. The girl hugged the old man. "Grandpa, don't start. Because I'm torn right now. But imagine for a moment what I'd do here. Men with hope looked into the eyes of his granddaughter. But your grandmother worked here all her life and never complained. Lisa did not want to upset the old man with a sharp refusal and turned the conversation in a more positive direction. Okay, Grandpa, I'll run to the store, and then I'll make you your favorite soup. We still have plenty of time to talk. The girl headed into the cramped hallway, and the old man followed the family man, followed by his granddaughter. I almost forgot. Have you stopped by the drugstore yet? Buy me some joint ointment. I can't get out of bed in the morning. Trevor took some new bills out of the dresser. Get yourself something nice too. I've been saving up for your arrival. You'll be at my place for a while. The old man looked at her with almost childlike hope, and Lisa realized that this was the question he was most concerned about. She kissed her grandfather, and I'm coming to see you for a whole week. If you haven't escorted me out before. A smile shone on Trevor's face, and the girl thought how little it takes for a man to feel happy. After a hearty dinner, the old man finally approved. He sat in the kitchen and watched his granddaughter put things in order. In contrast to him, Lisa was not satisfied. Grandfather had only 2 weeks to get this year. It's not hard to wipe the dust once in a while. I'm sorry, old man. I'm forgetting what I was doing and what I should be doing. You're the best instead of telling your grandfather off. Tell me, how's your young life? The girl perfectly understood the trick of the grandfather, but decided to pretend that she did not notice it. Yes, everything is fine. Soon the internship will begin, and then I'll get a diploma. But for that I need to prepare. The old man waved his hand impatiently. Work and study are all fifths. You'd better tell me, how are you doing on the personal front? With whom? Or are you expecting a prince? Basically, I'm a grandfather. I don't believe in it for a long time, but maybe I have a good one. His name is Rob, and he's graduating from college this year too. Only he has a different major. He's a dental technician. Trevor with a tongue is a very good profession. Always a piece of bread and butter. Hang on to that kid. What kind of family does your Rob from? Lisa was confused. She'd never inquired about her beau's lineage. Grandpa, I didn't go into that kind of detail. All I know is that Rob has a brother who is a very unpleasant type. He goes to our college too, but I try to stay out of his way. The old man suddenly perked up. Why is that? Where did the antipathy come from? Lisa blushed. She didn't want to tell the unpleasant story that happened at the disco in February, but the old man guessed it himself. He was hitting on you. Sort of, but I solved it quickly. Max and Rob are cousins. Betty, my girlfriend, said their moms are. For what reason? I don't know. I don't need to know. Granddaughter's not always lucky enough to have relatives. You don't know. I had a brother too. Trevor sighed heavily and thought. By the strained expression on his face, the girl realized that she shouldn't pester her grandfather with questions. The thought flashed in her head that if he wanted to, he would tell her himself. But the old man, holding his back, left the kitchen. I'm going, granddaughter. I'm going to lie down my joints. I'm going to use the ointment you brought. Trevor disappeared into the bedroom and didn't show up until late afternoon. Lisa decided to take advantage of the opportunity to clean up the big room. She opened the balcony and the door, and fresh air rushed into the room. Trying not to make any noise, the girl dusted and laid out. Scattered on chairs and armchairs, grandfather's things on the shelves of the closet. She didn't even notice how it started to get dark outside and was about to close the door to the balcony. How did the disgruntled landlord show up? Lisa, you wanted to kill me too. You let in a draft. My whole body is already aching. Grandpa, but you were resting. You could break your legs here. Don't exaggerate, because from your words it turns out that I'm the last one. It's cold here. Let's go to the kitchen. You put the kettle on, and I'll tell you about my brother. To be honest, I haven't been interested in his fate for a long time. I don't even know if he's alive or dead. Probably the latter. Andrew is 5 years older than me. He must be in his 80s now, if he's still alive. Aromatic tea, beautifully flavored by the cup, was shared on the table. And Lisa, holding her breath, listened to the unusual love story that made siblings enemies forever. Trevor and Andrew's parents were simple people. Ben went through the entire war and was only lightly wounded once. Returning home, he went about his usual business, laboring from dawn to dusk in the field. At that time, there was a catastrophic shortage of equipment, and mechanizers themselves repaired tractors at night and went out to the field in the morning. Ben's wife worked on the farm, so the older children were responsible for the younger kids. But Andrew did not like this division of responsibilities, and he could not wait until the end of school. True, the parents did not oppose the desire of the eldest son to get an education. On the contrary, they praised their son's success in front of all acquaintances and neighbors. Our Andrew will definitely become a boss. He is such a serious guy, not like Trevor. Listening to such speeches, the younger brother was angry. The boy wanted to prove to the whole world, and especially to his older brother, that he was not worse than him. This competitive process lasted for several years, but Andrew was still more successful. After the institute, he returned to his native village, and he was immediately appointed deputy chairman of the state farm. The young specialist openly boasted of his position, trying to prick his younger brother, who together with his father fought in the field for Trevor's harvest. They were immediately taken into the army for the very reason that there was a shortage of people who could operate machinery so easily. The shortage of personnel was also affected by the consequences of the past war. Only at the age of 23 the guy was called up for service. Then he spent 3 whole years mastering the military business in the Baltic Fleet, and after demobilization he returned home. During Trevor's service in his native village, there were serious changes. There was a new 2-story club, and it was now possible to get to the village on a smooth asphalt road. There were changes in the family, too, as my mother told me at once. Our Andrew was going to get married. You had just been taken to the service. Like us, they sent a paramedic and after school. Miranda's name. Good girl. At first, Trevor didn't pay any attention to the news. He himself was burning with impatience to meet the girl who had seen him off and had been writing letters for almost 3 years. But his mother looked pityingly at her son. Hush, you don't have to go to Nancy. The boy was surprised. Mom, what are you doing? I've been waiting all 3 years for this day. The woman repeated stubbornly. I'm telling you not to go. Nancy, you got married and went to town. I guess she wanted to hide from the shame. I didn't expect such a trick from her. She was like a daughter to me. She used to visit us almost every day. And then she stopped. For almost 6 months, Trevor suffered this personal tragedy. He became withdrawn and even talked to his parents only when necessary. But one day, the mechanic sent him into town. Trevor needs to get some spare parts for the machinery urgently from the warehouse. So I'm giving you my car for this purpose. But you must realize that every day counts. So make sure you get it done quickly. Trevor is accustomed to fulfill the assigned task and immediately went to the mountains. What was the guy's surprise when at the very warehouse where he was supposed to get the necessary parts for repair, he met the same Nancy, who did not wait for him. A wedding ring glowed on the young woman's finger, and this burned fire into Trevor's heart. He looked his former lover in the eyes for a long time. Then he asked, "Why didn't you write to me? It would have been fairer than marrying in secret." Nancy suddenly burst into tears. "Forgive me. Hush, my hasty marriage was a necessity. I had no other choice. So can you at least tell me now what happened? I'm not going to interfere with your family life, but at least I need to know the reason for your infidelity. You'll see. It's better if you don't know. I still don't understand how it happened." And the girl's frightened story, often interrupted by sobs. Trevor realized that his personal happiness had been interfered with by his older brother. When Trevor left for the service, Andrew courted Nancy for a long time, but their dates were secret, and no one knew about the fact that the older brother had stolen the bride from the younger. Nancy kept waiting for Andrew to propose. But then the beautiful Miranda appeared, and the lover began to avoid the girl. Nancy was ready to come to terms with her fiancé's betrayal, but to her horror she realized that she was expecting a child. Time flew inexorably, and she had to act decisively. One day the girl springs Andrew in a secluded place to tell him that he will be a father. But the man recoiled from her. "Nancy, leave me out of this. It can't be. After all, you and I have only twice had an unknown child by you." Such reproaches were painful to hear. And the unhappy girl begged Andrew, "I had no one before you. You know that very well. I'm pregnant with you." But these pleas and tears did not hurt the guy. He also ruthlessly threw in the girl's face, "Your tears, Nancy, will not help. You yourself know very well that I cannot marry you." Nancy seemed as if her heart had left her body. "Why, Andrew?" "Nancy, what kind of silly questions are these? First of all, I can't marry my brother's girl. Second of all, I already have fiancés. You may have heard that I'm dating Miranda, and we're getting married soon." Nancy froze in place. Andrew was gone from her life forever. For weeks, the girl didn't leave the house and her parents feared for her health. She searched for a way out of the situation, but found no good solution. Nancy confided to Trevor that she had the urge to lay hands on herself. Had it not been for Jacob, she would have carried out that intention. But this guy, whom Trevor knew well, convinced the girl not to go to the extreme step. To me, or I had once proposed to marry him, and I agreed. We moved to the city right after the wedding. Trevor was worried about the most important question and the child where. Nancy started crying again. "Perhaps it's all my own fault, or is it heaven's punishment? The boy was not born alive. All the way back, I silently thought only about what a bastard his own brother turned out to be. After all, he is, in fact, maimed to the wall of life. Now this cheerful girl is more like a mummy." He did not yet know what he would do, but he was firmly convinced that he would find a way to take revenge on his brother. Apparently, the heavens were also on his side. Just the day after the trip to town, Trevor accidentally injured his arm while repairing his tractor. Blood gushed from the open wound, and the men carried the lad to the dispensaries. From the mere sight of the wound, Trevor began to shake, but the paramedic reassured him to be patient. "My dear, now I treated your wound, and then for the neck." And Miranda took up the needle. The guy passed out. I had to bring him back to consciousness. When he woke up, the girl was surprised. Usually men don't faint at the sight of blood. "And you passed out right away." Trevor was ashamed. "I'm sorry, I didn't expect it myself. I saw a lot of scares when I was in the Navy, but this is the first time it's happened to me. It's probably a reaction to the massive bleeding." "Are you dizzy? Nauseous?" "To be honest, I really don't feel well. I was pretty nervous yesterday. My instructions are to send you to the hospital." "Trevor, there's no need to resist. I'm resilient. I'll be as good as new tomorrow." "All right, let's see what happens tomorrow, but we'll make a deal that you go home right now and go to bed." "Well, I can't. I got a job. I can't talk about work until you're fully recovered. I'll write you a note. And now I'll call your brother. Andrew is your older brother." Miranda kept her promise, and 10 minutes later, Andrew arrived at the paramedic station. But instead of words of sympathy, Trevor received a torrent of insults. The older brother shouted at him, not choosing expressions. "You idiot, you fool. The Almighty rewarded me with a brother. Admit it, did you do it on purpose to spite me? Now they're gonna use me in every meeting. Okay, if it was just about me, you've put our entire household in jeopardy. They're going to start proceedings now. They'll send a commission to rule that we're not following safety procedures." Miranda tried to stop Andrew's fiancé. "What are you talking about? Your brother's in trouble. And instead of sympathizing with him, you insult the man. Such a misfortune could have happened to anyone, and to you too." Big Brother first said to Miranda in a strange tone, "Stop covering up the headiness, and in general, I think it is inappropriate to breed calves whose tenderness here." No sooner had the door closed behind the window than the parents burst into the paramedic station. The mother began to wail beside her son, and Ben offered Trevor assistance, leaning on me. "Let's go home. You're scary to look at." White as a sheet. The paramedic escorted them to the exit and warned them to be sure to come back tomorrow for dressing. Trevor was on sick leave for almost 3 weeks. He went to the dressings every day and marveled at Miranda's ability to perform manipulations quickly and skillfully. They had a lot in common, and they could talk about nothing for a long time. But one day, this idyll was interrupted by Andrew. The older brother burst into the medical station during a routine procedure with a solemn look. He declared, "Which is exactly what I needed to prove. Caught you in the act." Sitting courtesy of Miranda didn't have to listen to reproach. "Andrew, leave the medical office. Are you interrupting my work? I'm already getting in your way." "Well, Miranda, I declare to you with all responsibility that I will not allow you to corrupt the population. I will report your unbecoming behavior to your superiors today." "What are you doing in the workplace?" Trevor's arm wasn't quite healed yet, but he wasn't afraid to stand up for the girl. "Andrew, I don't care if you're the boss. If you don't clean this up right now, I'm gonna kick your ass." Perhaps it was this determination of the younger brother that brought Andrew back to earth. He looked angrily first at the girl, then at Trevor. "You still got it in for me. I don't forgive those who humiliate me." Andrew walked away. They sat in confusion for a long while longer. Trevor was the first to break the silence. "Martin, don't worry. It's all just threats. I know my brother. He won't go beyond words. Andrew, he's just trying to play tough. In reality, he's not calculating, and he won't go for it." Trevor was not wrong in his predictions. Andrew, he only made promises. The next day, he showed up at the paramedic station apologizing. "My dear, I'm sorry. I overreacted. I said a lot of mean things. It's all my brother's fault. He used to turn me on with his antics when I was a kid." The girl didn't even turn around. But when the man wanted to approach her, she firmly said, "Andrew, don't come near me. It's over between us. And it is good that you showed your nature before the wedding. You are not a good man, and I am afraid of you." The rejected suitor collapsed on his knees. "Mart, I'm sorry. It was a momentary lapse of judgment. Any man can lose his temper." "No, not anyone. I'll be honest with you. I didn't expect this from you. And no need for theatrics here. It won't change anything." Humiliated by Andrew's refusal, he left and never showed up at the paramedic station again. A month later, Trevor and Martin married at the village hall. The newlyweds did not plan to leave the village, but Andrew did not keep his word and began to take revenge on his brother. So the young family was forced to move to a neighboring region. In the new place, they were welcomed with open arms, and 5 years later, they received an apartment in a new house. Lisa was shocked by her grandfather's revelation. She had no idea what trials this man had to go through. After all, it must be very hard to disown your own brother. Trevor looked at his granddaughter with an inquisitive gaze. "Do you mean to ask if I was looking for a meeting with Andrew?" The girl only nodded in agreement, and the grandfather concluded his tale. "Perhaps it is cruel, but I did not want to see him. My greatest fear then was that it was you in the image of my brother." From the life of another girl. Soon, Andrew got into big trouble at work and left. He wrote to his parents, but I didn't read those letters. Then things started to change in the country. And as far as I know, the brother became a businessman. A cry of pain in my lower back. The old man took a thick album out of the dresser drawer. At first I had the urge to burn all the pictures of my brother, but then I changed my mind. "Here, look here, we were photographed together on my shipment." Lisa carefully took the yellowed old snapshots in her hands. "You two look so much alike." "Yes, my granddaughter even confused us sometimes, but 5 years of age difference is still a big deal. Grandfather, be honest, if you had the chance, you'd like to see your brother." The old man lowered his head again, as if on a clean floor. There was an answer to this important question. "I don't even know, Lisa, what to tell you. I've been thinking a lot about my past life and my present life. I guess I could forgive Andrew now. In my heart, I forgave him a long time ago. And as for seeing him, I don't think he's alive. My parents died, and I never found out. Where's the brother? Grandpa, after this conversation, as if immediately by nickname Lisa, even worried about his state of health. But the next day, Trevor already complained about the life of neighbors and inattention of daughters. So the girl decided that it was better not to bring back his memories. The beginning of practice was marked by one not quite pleasant event. Golden was sent to the regional hospital and Lisa to the city polyclinic. But the unpleasant situation was that there also got the hated Lola. Max has already managed to get used to the department of the medical institution and decided to conduct a tour for the girls. The guy met them at the entrance and looked at Lisa with undisguised gloating. I want to advise you young girls not to show your character here. The polyclinic has a long-established team, and the old-timers are reluctant to accept newcomers into their ranks. That's why the main rule here is to keep a low profile. Lola cheerfully noted Max not to stir up mud. Such problems are eliminated. Just need to cover a good field, and everything will be tight-top. There is not a single case of refusal of freebies in history. Lisa had been stunned before by a classmate's language, and she couldn't keep her mouth shut. Lola, if you're going to communicate with patients in your own language, you're going to need an interpreter. Lola, as usual, looked down at Lisa. Are you the smartest? Or are you showing off for Max? Maybe it bothers you that I'm dating him. The girl calmly answered neither. I don't care about Max at all. I'm more concerned with practice now, and I know well the public that visits the clinics. They are mostly old people, children, and women. Eka, Ms. Know-It-All. Personally, I can do without your consultation, and in fact, I do not plan to stay here for a month. She promised to arrange for me to spend the entire internship at his friend's clinic. Lola and Max moved on down the corridor, and Lisa decided to leave the company. The young man asked Lisa, "What are you standing there for?" "Let's catch up." "Thank you, but I'd rather walk the floors myself. It'll be safer for everyone." "Lola, meet me at the superintendent's office." The girl reached the end of the long corridor, and she completely lost the desire to go up to the third floor. She went back and waited for the head of the department to appear. Soon, the intern noticed. Energetically stride along the corridor stocky middle-aged man. He was smiling. "Oh, a new addition. We've been waiting for you for a long time. We have a critical shortage of specialists at our stations. Nurses have to work in emergency mode and serve 2, and sometimes even 3 sites." The head opened the door of his office. "Come in and let's get acquainted." He extended his hand to Lisa. Lisa made a reciprocal gesture. "Lisa, I'm not the only one who was referred to you. There's another girl coming in now." "That's fine. There's no time for a warm-up. So we're going to assign you to experienced sisters right away. Your job is to listen to your mentors. Do what they say, but we're sure there won't be any problems. After all, you and without 5 minutes ready nurses." The head's optimistic speech was interrupted by the appearance of Lola. She slipped neatly through the open door and asked angrily for Lisa. "Sorry, I'm a little late. I was familiarizing myself with the polyclinic." Nick repeated what Lisa had said. But Lola listened to the superintendent inattentively and even tried to make eyes at him. But the man did not pay attention to the flirtation of the brightly painted girl. He only warned girls, "We have a very different environment here. Therefore, I ask you to dress in full compliance with the requirements of our institution, and bright makeup is not welcome here either." Lola poked, but said nothing. Nick called for the head nurse. Not more than a minute after his call, and a stately woman of about 45 years old entered the office with a brisk gait. "Yes, Nick." The superintendent briefly recounted to the assistant. "What is her task?" "Adriana, I would like to ask you to help the girls to settle in. Hopefully, they will like our clinic and express their desire to stay with us." The head nurse smiled welcomingly. "Let's go, girls. I'll bring you up to speed, and then together with me you'll go to the action zone." The new Adriana looked at her carefully again. "I said something wrong." Lola poked forward into her lower lip, signifying the highest degree of her displeasure. I have the impression that we are not in a medical facility, but in a soldier's barracks. The head nurse took the girls under her arms, but before doing so, she closed the door of the chief's office tightly. That's what my dear girls nail on your pretty insects, that in any medical institution, the main thing is discipline and subordination. That's why we have a regiment akin to the army. If someone doesn't like it, you should change careers before it's too late. I understand what I'm saying. Lola lowered her eyes, but her plump lips continued to whisper something. Lisa had to answer for two. I understand, Adriana. Good. Then the young guard will follow me. A quarter of an hour later, they were already sitting in the car, and the nurse was voicing the plan of further actions. So, my girls, I have assigned you to the areas where I am now temporarily replacing the nurses. Your appointments will begin this evening. Before that, we need to make a round of the bedridden patients, mostly elderly people who need special care. Lola blurted out, and we were told in college that all patients should be treated equally. Adriana gave Lola another unkind look. You must not have been listening very well. In medicine, we practice an individual approach, and district nurses have to be a bit of a psychologist. Lola poked out of habit, and the mentor decided to put the insolent trainee in her place. Girl, are you all right with your health? Lola stammered, sort of all right. Why did you ask? Snorts. How were you in the stall? And that's a sign of an upper respiratory problem. Maybe you have maxillary sinusitis. It's a disease that's dangerous to the patient and to others. Get it checked out just in case. Lisa wanted to show her support for the head nurse with a standing ovation, but she only smirked and looked at Adriana gratefully. The woman understood the look and smiled too. Lola did not utter another word. For over 3 hours, they drove around the city, and Adriana talked about every sick person they visited. Some she took their blood pressure, others she gave them an injection. Memorize, girls. Are you going to go to those addresses tomorrow? We're almost there. We only have one last address left. It's the highlight of our program. So please, nothing too much, including inappropriate emotions. They pulled up to a nice 2-story mansion. The driver signaled, and the gates began to slowly open. Noticing the surprised faces, the trainee, Adriana, explained, Our Andrew lives in this house. A very important person in the past, a successful businessman, and even a bit of a scientist. I don't know all of them, but I think he even has state awards for special contributions. The old man is very unhealthy, you could say conflicted. He has diabetes and a bunch of other ailments. The door was opened by an elderly woman. Noticing the head nurse, she nodded affably. Already she's nervous, saying you're late, and Adriana paid no attention to the woman's remark. Our old man has a small staff of servants. His son and his family used to live with him, but he literally chewed up his relatives, and they left. Now he's on his own. He pours out his discontent on anyone who comes to hand. Lisa expected to see an old man almost dying, but in the office the desk was piled with books and newspapers. Sitting there was an elderly man in a velvet house robe. At their appearance, he adjusted his expensive rimmed glasses. Ah, you're the one. You're late today. I already checked the sugar myself. Adriana put the emergency suitcase on the nightstand. You're a real unicum, Andrew. There's traffic everywhere. We've joined in a little bit. We're gonna take you now. Okay, I'll forgive you for the first time, but I hope it doesn't happen again. The man looked at the trainees incredulously. Who are these young ladies? Young cadres. It's good to have someone to pass on experience to. I also try to make the most of it. My time is allotted to me. The man looked at his desk. I wanted to write memoirs at first, but then I thought that someone would start digging into my biography and changed my mind. I decided to gather all my experience in agriculture into a single whole. Yeah, I'm a loner. Don't be surprised. I've been involved in some of these things. The old man tried to flirt with the head nurse, but he did it awkwardly, unexpectedly. He rolled his eyes and started pushing himself to the floor. Lola squealed in fear, and Lisa managed to pick up the splintered neck of the body because she was closest to the old man. Adriana threw towards Lola an unkind look. "Girl, you better get out. We don't need panickers here." Lisa was not distracted by her surroundings. She carefully laid the man on the carpet and turned his head on its side, then took hold of his wrist. No pulse visible and a faint filling. Adriana squatted down next to the intern. Sometimes our Andrew has attacks like this, but no matter how much we persuade him, he won't go to the hospital. The head nurse filled a syringe with medicine and gave the patient an injection. The old man breathed more evenly and slowly opened his eyes. "I don't even want to hear about hospitalization. I'll die at home." "It's a little early. You're talking about dying. You've still got the kind of energy that would make any young person jealous." The women picked up the old man and led him to the couch. Taking the opportunity, the man reminded Adriana of his long-standing request. "Zinchenko, you never sent me a good nurse. Or have you completely forgotten about my request?" "Andrew, how can you say that when I sent you 5 people? They're inexperienced. One of them can't do anything, and the other one forgets to wash her hands. And I have a weak body. I could get an infection. And then what?" The old man became agitated, and his breathing increased again. Lisa sat down next to him. "You need to rest now, or you'll pass out again. Can I get you some water?" "Yeah, if it's not too much trouble, there's water in the carafe of cookies. I don't drink poison from the tap. They've polluted the environment. Now you can easily get poisoned by plain water." Lisa brought water. The old man drank small sips and kept looking at the girl. "Quench your thirst." He handed the glass back to her and turned to Adriana. "She's a nice girl, and she has a pleasant appearance. That's the kind of nurse I'd like to have around." The main nurse is confused. "Andrew, Lisa, we've only got her first day of internship. She doesn't have her diploma yet." "What does a diploma have to do with anything? That girl has a positive energy about her. One visit from her is soothing." Lisa made eye contact with the head nurse. "What's wrong with that offer?" Adriana threw such matters out of the window. "Lisa will do her allotted hours at the clinic, and then she will do her internship at the hospital." "Okay, we're late for our appointment." The old man said goodbye to them and promised I'd try to solve the problem myself. Lola was waiting for them in the car. She was silent all the way back to the clinic, only at the end of the way. When they drove onto the overpass, she hissed with the same anger. "You're doing a great job, turning your whole hide inside out." Lisa replied in the same tone. "Are you in pain? You should show what you can do." I muttered in confusion. When that old man collapsed on the floor, I myself was frightened and almost collapsed. If you panic from such events, the only place for you to work is the registrar's office. Lola looked at Lisa with interest, and her eyes were alive and sparkling. "Listen, that's not a bad idea. Sit by the window and smile at everyone." A crowd had already gathered around the office to which Adriana had directed them. But Lola sat on the couch for 3 hours with an indifferent look, and no one paid any attention to her because everyone wanted to get out of the line and go home as soon as possible. Almost every 5 minutes, the doctor would send the intern somewhere for tests or for the result of someone else's cardiogram. By evening, Lisa's feet were burning. She barely made it to the apartment and collapsed on the couch. Wendy leaned over and touched her lips to her daughter's forehead. "Lisa, you don't look well, but you don't seem to have a fever." The girl smiled. "Mommy, there's nothing wrong with me. It's just that I ran so many kilometers in a day that even my legs are twitching." Wendy covered her daughter with a blanket and went to the kitchen. From there, she yelled. Grandpa called. Asked how you were doing. I said I was fine. Tired and all over my body. Lisa herself did not notice how she fell asleep. Images of the past day flashed before her eyes. But at the center of the mosaic was the old man she had given first aid to. The thought flashed through my mind, who this grandfather reminded me so much of. It was already dark outside the window when her mother gently woke her up and called her to dinner. She told her parents about all of today's adventures and forgot to describe the special patient. The next morning, Lisa barely crossed the threshold of the polyclinic. She was summoned to the office of the head of the clinic. Noticing that the trainee got worried, the head nurse patted her on the shoulder. "Don't worry, beautiful. You distinguished yourself yesterday, and it became known to the superiors. In short, go to the head. He will explain everything to you." The girl knocked on the door with a sinking heart. Nick greeted her like an old acquaintance. "Come in, Lisa, sit down. We will have a long conversation with you." The man began to state the essence of the case 100 by 100, nodding on the table with a pencil. "I have no right to order you around and can only ask one favor." Lisa tensed and quietly mumbled, "I've done something wrong." The superintendent smiled. "What is it about this actress?" "On the contrary, Adriana spoke very highly of you, and one of our patients, you won him over in a heartbeat." "You mean the old guy we saw yesterday?" "Him. Very mean grandpa, loves to make complaints about everyone. He's made complaints about us too, but there's nothing we can do about it. Our vocation is to treat the sick, regardless of their peculiarities. Anyway, Andrew liked you very much, and he demanded that we send you to be his nurse." The girl was surprised. "But that's not possible. I have to work hours in the hospital, on the ambulance, and in other units." The superintendent put his pencil aside. "I think we can settle this matter if you agree to a special mission. You see, Lisa, our patient is not a simple man. He has a special merit, and he's manipulating it. It's useless to fight him. It's better to submit. But in my practice, I have to account for every day, so you don't have to worry about that. We'll sign everything and thank you separately, if that's okay." "Then I agree." Nick is happy. "Thank you, colleague. Then you will take up your duties as of today." Lisa headed for the door, still not fully understanding what had happened. But the superintendent stopped her and forgot to tell you the most important thing. There are some costs to being a caregiver, so you'll be able to recover some of them. Mostly moral. Lisa went to a familiar address. She was greeted by the same silent housekeeper. The woman didn't even say hello, just nodded toward the stairs. "He's waiting." Andrew she found in the men's bedroom and lay in bed, covering her eyes and sighing heavily. At the girl's appearance, the sighs increased. Lisa came closer. "Hello, I was asked to look after you." The old man's voice was cheerful. "Asked by whom?" "It was me who asked, because you have a professional streak in you. I've had a lot of lame asses sent to me before. I'm not feeling well today. I should take your blood pressure and check your sugar. Then a neck massage would be nice. I hope they taught you how to massage." The patient kept asking questions, and Lisa had no time to answer them. After the standard medical procedures, Andrew wanted to get some fresh air. "Lisa, there's a stroller down there. Would you be so kind as to bring my transportation up here? I don't have any energy today." They walked in the garden for over an hour. And the old man didn't just want to breathe the fresh air. He demanded to be taken to one corner of the territory and then to another. During the movement, he was happy to tell the girl about his scientific work. "I am an agronomist by basic education, but I did not work in my specialty. For many years, all sat in responsible positions. And then, when the whole world turned upside down and bosses joined the ranks of the unemployed, I decided to go into business. You could even say that I was one of the leaders of this movement. I won't hide it. Luck didn't smile on me right away. Twice I ruined everything to nothing. Only later, when it turned out that the light was forever extinguished in my window, I remembered about my diploma Lizhinka in this garden, all the results of my work. Of course, I was not alone in creating new varieties of vegetables, flowers, and fruit crops. I was helped by like-minded people. During the walk, Lisa learned a lot of interesting things, but the constant tension had a strong effect on the girl's health, and by the end of the day, she could hardly move her legs. On reaching home, the girl collapsed on the sofa again. Wendy was worried. "Daughter, what kind of patient did you get?" "Probably an energy vampire." "Leave him. He'll take all your strength. But the girl didn't listen to her mother's advice. The first week was difficult, but she survived the ordeal and even got used to the quirks a little. Andrew. The old man then pretended to be terminally ill and refused to walk on his own, then jogged in the park. At the end of the week, the patient paid off the young nurse. When Lisa counted the money in the envelope, she thought, "For this kind of reward, I'm willing to put up with a couple more months." But the older man had a very different calculation. One day he said to Lisa, "Lisa, you suit me in every way. I would very much like to have you in my house all the time." The girl wanted to refuse such a tempting offer, but the old man beat her to it. "Don't be so quick to say no. I'm not just offering you this alliance for no reason. And for a certain remuneration, I've managed to insert a nurse. Andrew, I'm not really interested in money. And then I have a family and a boyfriend I'm going to marry." Tears glistened in the old man's eyes. Family. Such a small word and so succinct. I had a family a long time ago too, but I was too young. And for me there were very different reference points. Lesjinka, if you don't mind, go to my office and bring a notebook with memoirs written on it. At one time I even counted myself in the ranks of geniuses, but then I realized that I am just like everyone else, no more than an ordinary unhappy old man. This lengthy monologue of the ward left a disturbing feeling in the girl's soul. It seemed to her that she had already heard such arguments, but there was no time to strain her memory. And Lisa went to run errands. Andrew's office was not gloomy. That's because the heavy curtains were pulled tightly as the girl walked past the shelves of books. She accidentally touched this light construction, and a photograph in an antique frame fell on the floor. In the semi-darkness, it was impossible to make out the image, and she placed the picture at random on one of the hangings. Not without difficulty, Lisa found a large leather-bound notebook on the table labeled Memoirs. She thought that Andrew was about to read out excerpts from this work to her, but the old man went deeper into reading, and she was sent home. "Lisa, you may be dismissed. I shall expect you tomorrow morning as usual." The girl had no sooner reached home than she remembered where she had seen exactly the same picture. There was no complete certainty yet. After all, the old man's study was dark. It only seemed to her that there was a resemblance. She thought she'd find out tomorrow. "I think I should carefully sneak into the study and reread the memoirs of my special patient." At the threshold of the apartment, she bumped into her mother. "Wendy was surprised to see you early today. Your grandfather is fine. By the way, your own grandfather called and expressed his displeasure. I support him. Instead of looking after other people's relatives, you should look after your own." Her mother's emotional remarks again caused concern. Somewhere in a remote corner of her brain there was a thought that the girl could not grasp. For days, Lisa had been trying to catch a good moment to get into Andrew's office, but it was as if the old man sensed it and gave her different errands, which took a lot of time. Only on Saturday, he felt weak again and went to bed. The nurse settled down next to him. We took his blood pressure every hour. When she noticed that he was dozing off, the girl tiptoed out of the bedroom and into the study. She pulled back the curtains as she approached the shelving unit. Immediately, she was stunned. It was the exact same picture as her grandfather's. Oh my God! How did I not realize Andrew was my grandfather's brother? Lisa rushed to the table, where a thick notebook with a detailed biography of the old man was still lying in a prominent place. But at that moment there were footsteps behind them, and a familiar voice said with condemnation how unkind it was to rummage through other people's things. "And I thought so highly of you." The owner of the house stood leaning on his cane and stared at the nurse. "I guess you and I will have to part. That's a pity." The man turned, but Lisa with despair. Andrew exclaimed, "Wait, I'll explain everything to you now." The old man froze in place. "What did you call me, Andrew?" "How do you know?" "My real name." He turned again and slowly approached the girl. "Bug, I didn't realize. Have you had a chance to study my memoirs?" No, I haven't even drawn them to your notebook. I only looked at that picture over there, because the old man's face turned stony with tension. He was worried, and Lisa was afraid he might have another attack. He tapped his cane demandingly. "Why didn't you say something? You're talking. I'm giving you one last chance to justify your ugly deed." Lisa herself approached the old man and, looking him straight in the eye, said slowly, "Andrew, I am your brother Trevor's granddaughter. You haven't forgotten that you have a brother." The nurse had expected anything but such a reaction. The old man was outraged. "He's the one who sent you to me on purpose. I don't want to hear anything about him. He ruined my life, took my fiancée from me, thanks to my brother. I'm a miserable existence now, and no one cares about me." This outburst of emotion drained the old man of his last strength. He collapsed in his chair and sobbed. Lisa did not know what to do. She was afraid to approach the man, lest she make him even more angry. But Andrew himself commanded, "What are you standing there for? Your eyes are bulging. See, I'm not well in Capri. Take some drops of sedative and get some water to drink." The girl rushed to carry out the order, while one thought was pounding in her head. What should I do next? The old man took the medicine and closed his eyes. Lisa stood next to him, afraid to move. "Why are you standing there like a dead man? Do you think I believe in your fairy tales? Admit it. You're a con artist. You've been trying to gain my trust on purpose so you could inherit my estate. I know the type, but I'm not fooled." That kind of accusation pissed the girl off. "What the hell do I need your mansion for? I'm already regretting that I met you. My grandfather and his tricks are not enough for me. Now you've fallen on my head. I've had enough. Find yourself another nurse." Lisa was relieved to have said all her grievances to the old man's face. She rushed out of the office, but the owner's voice came from behind her. "Lisa, wait. Why are you so quick to take offense? I didn't say anything bad to you. Stop it." The old man caught up with her at the stairs. The most surprising thing was that he moved briskly without using his cane. "I didn't even realize you had a temper. It's our breed. Ack, you're hot. So you say it, Trevor. The girl is barely alive. He told me everything. And why you quarreled. And why you cannot forgive each other. He told me about Nancy, too." The old man waved his hands vigorously. Then everything passed, flew away, and was forgotten. Just lyrics. "You'd better tell me where he's holed up. He lives in a village outside the city. Miranda, my grandmother died long ago, and my grandfather is only one, and as mean as you. Now, I believe that character is passed on by genes. Let's save the high theories for later. I'm pretty good at genetics myself. That's not what concerns me." The man paused and asked confusedly, "Do you think we should not meet? That's for you to decide." "All right, I'll think about it. You call right away today." Lisa is very tired. After all the upheavals of this unusual day, it was even difficult for her to move her tongue. She mumbled something indistinctly and hurried to leave the house. But the old man from above shouted, "Lisa, you're not going to leave me after everything that's transpired. You'll come back tomorrow. I'll give you a raise next week." The girl stumbled to the bus stop. She mentally berated herself. Why did I get involved in this story? Now my grandfathers will drink all the juice out of me. There was one, and now there are two. Her parents had already had dinner. Wendy put a plate of vermicelli and a cutlet in front of her, and Lisa ate, picking at it with her fork, and her mother washed her. What's wrong again? You can't take everything to heart. It'll burn so fast. If that mean old man's bothering you again, you should dump him. Mom, it's not just a patient, it's Grandpa's missing sibling. Wendy opened her mouth in surprise. Andrew, that's the one. Can you believe it? Living practically next door to each other and not seeing each other for half a century. I thought stories like that only happened in movies and novels. Daughter, what are we gonna do? Now I'm thinking about it myself. We have to tell grandfather first, and then we'll decide. We'll consult with your father. He has a clearer mind than you and me. After a family meeting, The three of them decided that it would be better to organize the meeting with the consent of both parties. Lisa insisted on it because she was afraid that two old people might not be able to bear the shock of the meeting. But she could not foresee what happened afterwards. On the agreed day, James went to the village in the morning to pick up his father-in-law. It turned out that Trevor was not ready yet. The son-in-law began to wait patiently when he would bring himself in order. But the old man began to interrogate him. "James, why didn't Lisa show up herself?" "She's at work." "I thought you said Andrew had a nurse on the books." "Yeah, well, that's her job. I mean, it's a practicum." So the granddaughter I've devoted so much to is grooming this scumbag. James realized that the brothers' reunion was about to be derailed, so he decided to yell at his grandfather. "Trevor, you asked to go to your brother's house, and now you're going to leave. I think it's time we put aside our past feuds and grudges. It's been half a century." This reprimand had an effect on the old man, and he puffed unhappily and went out into the living room. "James, if I look like this suit, my brother's an oligarch. He'll laugh at a simple tractor driver." Anticipating a new round of discontent, the man cried out, "Oh my God, this song is good. Start again." Finally, the car pulled away from the driveway, and Trevor froze in the back seat. In an hour or so, James and his relative aboard made it to the other end of town, where Lisa and her ward were already waiting impatiently for them. Everyone at the meeting was anxious, and it was noticeable. Trevor got out of the car and looked around first. "Yeah," the brothers waving his chorus. "It's not like we just gave them all 30 squares in an apartment." With Lisa's help, the older brother also took a closer look at the guest and went out on the front porch, even giving up a bone for the occasion. "Lisa, put that away. I don't want Trevor to think I'm helpless." The girl silently accepted the aid and helped her ward down the steps. Andrew did not hold back from making a visual comment. Actually, a lot of honor for him. But okay, I only tolerate myself. I don't know why I'm doing all this. James, or from behind, watched as the old men walked towards each other. With each step, the distance between them was shrinking, and it seemed like they were about to embrace. And that would be the end of the era of brotherly enmity. But the elderly men stopped, not daring to take the last step. The younger brother coldly said, "I didn't expect to see you alive. Do mole that you died a long time ago." But Andrew didn't put words in his pocket either. "Likewise, brother didn't expect to see you alive either. But I'm glad. I must admit I'm not very glad. I've long since gotten used to not having anyone." Lisa realized that everything was about to fall apart with her and her father. Right in front of her eyes, she gathered all of her grandfather's talent. "Please don't fight right now. It's such an unusual day. It's been so long since you've seen each other, hasn't it?" Trevor didn't let his granddaughter finish. "Lisa, who are you in front of now? You've traded me for that rascal. Don't you realize he's taking revenge on me after half a century?" "I'm right, Andrew." Lisa's patient didn't understand what the guest was accusing him of. "Trevor, what are you talking about, brother? Are you planning to win my only granddaughter to your side with your wealth to avenge Martha?" "Trevor, you're out of your mind. You must have been stung by a poisonous bee this morning. I waited for you like a man, like a brother, and you're on my doorstep hurling insults at me. Go away. I don't want to see you again. I hate the look on your face. And you pretend to be sick, and you jump up and down the stairs like a stallion." Trevor turned and waved to his son-in-law. "James, let's all go home." The ceremony was over. Lisa rushed after her grandfather. "Grandpa, what are you doing? You're the one who asked for this meeting." The aggrieved old man turned around. "And you're Lisa. You don't have to come to me anymore. You have a rich grandfather now. You even take care of him. And you've forgotten your way back to me." Trevor got into the car and slammed the car door loudly. His older brother stood in the same spot and desperately shouted, "Well, roll on. We haven't seen each other in 50 years, and we won't see each other again. Lisa, help me into the house. I don't feel well." The girl just burst into tears. "You know I don't work for you anymore." The only thing I can do for you right now is call an ambulance. Lisa rushed past the old man into the house and grabbed her purse. She was crying. I wanted you two to make up so badly. How about you? Andrew stood there and blinked his eyes in surprise. No one has ever called me Gusak in my life. The car with the guests had long ago disappeared from view, and in the distance the figure of a girl who in just a few weeks could change the life of a lonely old man. Andrew still hoped that she would return, but the nurse did not appear. Only late in the evening he made his way into the house, and at the very entrance noticed his cane left by Lisa. The old man picked up the innocent object and brought it down forcefully on his knee. There was a crack that sounded very loud in the evening silence. The old man shouted, turning his eyes toward him, "I've ruined everything, you old jackass. I myself have dreamed of making peace with my brother for so many years." Wendy, by the expression on her husband's daughter's face, realized that the meeting had failed. I knew it was a stupid idea from the start. My mother, when she was alive, told me in every detail about the conflict that had arisen because of her. I know my father too well to believe in a fairy tale reconciliation. Lisa drank her tea in silence, but after her mother's words, she said confidently, "Mom, I've reconciled them anyway. I don't know how to do it yet, but I'll think of something." Wendy sighed. "Oh, I don't know, daughter. For so many years, they've been basically complete strangers. And on the other hand, by the old age, everyone has a desire to be closer to their native roots, and they have such a thing for each other. I sometimes think, the bad character of my father and now Andrew, it's in their genes, or maybe they're just afraid to be good." That's when James stepped in. "You women love to find an explanation for everything. I mean, think about how they were when they were young. And all we know is what your father told Wendy. And no one listened to Andrew's side of the story. It's entirely possible that it's a different one. And it's only by putting one on top of the other that we can finally figure out who's right and who's wrong." Wendy looked at her husband thoughtfully. "James, do you think after all these years it matters anymore?" Did he wave his hand? "Honestly, I'm not sure of anything myself. But I understand our daughter has your family's stubborn streak, and she won't give up. So we have to start somewhere." Lisa put the mug down. "Mom, Dad's right, and you're right when you say that if you don't understand something, you should go to Dad." James looked at his wife gratefully and smiled. "Daughter, can you count on me? If I can do anything, I will help you." Lisa decided to give Adrian and Grandpa a few days to pine away. First on her list was Andrew. She figured she'd have time to figure out what to say to him, how to get him to open up. Adriana met her at the doorstep. "Lisa, what's wrong?" "What do you mean?" "Well, you're supposed to be at Andrew's." Lisa smiled. "What did you call and complain already?" "No, but I'm just surprised to see you here." "Adriana, I won't go to him anymore." "You don't have to talk me into it." But Lisa the girl almost interrupted her. "I'm sure he won't ask for a nurse again. If anything, Grandpa is quite still alive, and believe me, he runs faster than I do." Adriana exclaimed, "What the hell happened?" "Oh my God, I'm in so much trouble." Lisa didn't have time to answer. "How did Mom hear what happened again?" "Can you hear you in the next ward?" "I won't believe that Lisa's smart, kind girl upset you so much." Lisa turned around abruptly and froze. Rob was approaching them with a smile. Adriana quickly turned around and then threw herself at her son. "How many times have I asked you to call me by my middle name at work?" Rob smiled even wider. "Excuse me, Adriana, may I ask what I've upset you about, Lisa?" The woman looked at Lisa in surprise. "Do you two know each other? Aren't you the beautiful Lisa I've heard so much about?" Lisa blushed instantly and shrugged her shoulders. "Adriana, the young people followed me. They entered some kind of office, and the nurse closed the door behind them. Rob, maybe Lisa will listen to you and go back to Andrew." "Who's Andrew?" "It's a long explanation. One very elderly and very cranky patient." Rob turned to Lisa. "Lisa, why are you hurting patients?" Lisa laughed involuntarily. So funny was Rob's tone. She drew in more air. I can't go back to him, because we had a fight, not as caregiver and patient, but as granddaughter and grandfather. The thing is, Andrew turns out my grandfather is really my great-uncle. Adriana shook his head. I don't understand. What granddaughter? Oh, it's such a long story. My grandfather and Andrew. They fought when they were young. Now they're both old people and they both miss each other. But they are so stubborn that even at the meeting we arranged for them, they manage to immediately fight, call each other names, and then part as enemies again. I think they should make up. They don't have much time in this world. And they, their bad temper is just a consequence of fighting. You should see them together like two sheep with their horns locked together and no place else to go. Rob chuckled. That's quite a story. How long have they been estranged? For over 50 years. Adriana waved her hand. Doesn't that remind you of anything? I'm sure there's a woman involved in their case, just like ours involves a man. Anyway, that's Lisa. I'm going to draw up a new schedule now. Let's hope your ward doesn't alert the whole city. And if he does, we'll be on the defensive. Lisa changed her clothes and went out. She had already seen Lola sitting at the reception desk with an important look and not reacting to the patients asking her anything. She was concentrating on the scenery outside the window. Lisa did not interfere with the work process because she herself had things to do. But they had to cross paths again. And in the most unexpected way, they ran into each other in the doorway when they went out after work. But the most interesting thing was not that. Max and Rob were waiting outside. Lola walked over to Max and glanced at Rob, but he just turned away and smiled at Lisa. What are you up to? Let's go. He put his arm around her shoulders and dragged her away from the hospital porch. Lisa walked at first, then indignantly threw off his arm. If you're showing off, passed from Max. There was so much surprise in Rob's gaze that Lisa immediately felt ashamed. I'm sorry, Rob. What are you? I'm totally, he exhaled. Okay, never mind. I have an idea to reconcile your grandfathers. If you have time, let's go to the park. I'll tell you. Lisa looked at the time. Mom's gonna be worried. Lisa really didn't want to upset her or Dad right now. Recent events had somehow brought them very close together. She looked at Rob. Look, why don't we go over there and we can talk? Rob looked at her in surprise. And how would you introduce me? Lisa smiled. She wasn't at all sure she was doing the right thing. She didn't know how her mom would take it. But there was no other way. I'll introduce you as a friend to a coworker. James paced from corner to corner. I don't know. I think it's a completely crazy idea. And if it doesn't work out, do you realize that this will be the end of it? Lisa nodded that in our case, the end would be a return to the way things were before. That is, they just won't remember each other at all. James raised his glasses to his forehead, looking at his daughter. So I take it you're already on board. Dad hasn't yet. But Rob makes a good point. Such a strong quarrel by traditional methods. Not calm down. You need some kind of emotional outburst. Wendy poured tea, Rob. But darling, they're very old. What if the heart can't take it? Mom, we need to get someone to tell them I've been hit by a car. Someone who can watch me, give me a shot. But I think grandpas are a lot stronger than they realize. James sighed. Well, let's give it a try, shall we? Rob, you tell me what you decide about the performance chamber. Rob waved his head contentedly. Yeah, Mom will help. Wendy said we better not be enemies with the grandfathers. They'll find out it's not true. They won't forgive us. Lisa replied, we won't say we lied. It's just a strong body. That's why she got better. Or were you sent home for treatment? Rob raised his hand. By the way, the second option is a win-win. Elderly people will have a chance to scold medicine and take care of Lisa together. We just need to get it all mapped out, calculated. I set up some kind of accident for Lisa. It's a deal. In 3 days, Lisa had to visit one and the other grandfather before, so to speak, to set up bridges. Trevor met his granddaughter with a guilty look. Forgive us, Old fools. But I guess we'll live out our lives one by one. But don't take offense. Come back often. Lisa hugged her grandfather, saying she'd never leave him. Trevor even wept. She was leaving. It's a bit of a nerve-wracking feeling. It doesn't make sense. It could be that Mom's right, and they're doing this for nothing. They're old people, after all. But after a little thought, she decided that she would not abandon the plan. They were all sure the grandfathers would make up. At her hospital bed, which Lisa finds herself in after a car accident that won't really happen, the next day, she has to visit Andrew. Lisa was working and thinking about what Lisa will be talking to him about. She was surprised to see Max walking towards her. "Max, Lisa, I want to invite you to a movie tonight." The girl looked at him in surprise. "But what about Lola? What about Lola? She's dumb as a cork." "I'm sorry, Max, but I can't." Lisa turned away, considering the question exhausted. And then she met the angry stare of Alla, who was standing outside the door. And of course, she heard everything. Max kept up. "Listen, you can't do it today. Let's do it tomorrow." Lisa turned to him. Max was smiling. "Max, answer me one question. Who are you trying to hurt right now, Lola or Rob?" Max's kind, naive eyes narrowed a moment ago. "Aren't you a little too smart for a regular nurse? A trainee. And I'll answer that I'm trying to kill two birds with one stone." Max turned around and headed for the exit, and Lisa looked where Lola had just stood. She hoped that the girl had heard everything, but she was not there. Rob was sitting by Lisa's parents. "I don't understand what's taking so long. It'll be dark soon. How is she going to get home?" James looked at Rob and smiled. He really liked the guy. Wendy Trevor seemed to like him, too. "Maybe I should call her after all. Wendy's got the phone. I'll call her. I'm a mom, after all. It won't raise any suspicions." Wendy dialed the number. She listened for a long time. "I don't get it." No answer. Rob said maybe the phone's in her purse, and she's somewhere in the rooms. "You know what? I'm gonna go to her place. She's probably forgotten it's time to put the plan in motion." James was getting worried. "You're probably right. Call her right away." "I will." Rob drove up to Andrew's house. It was strangely quiet, and even the gate was closed. He parked, went to the gate, stood for a while, dialed Lisa, but the receiver was now switched off. Rob resolutely pressed the call button. The gate opened, and an elderly woman stood behind it. "Hello. Hello. Can I speak to Lisa?" "But Lisa hasn't come to see us for days." Rob felt a chill run down her spine. "That can't be. She was on her way to your house around 5 o'clock today." The woman shrugged. "If you don't believe me, ask Andrew." She headed toward the house, and Rob followed her. He really hoped the lady hadn't seen Lisa arrive, although that was very unlikely. Andrew was sitting at the table. "Who else is there?" He looked unhappily at the housekeeper, then at Rob. The young man spoke up. "The thing is, Lisa was supposed to go to your place after work today. But I understand she didn't get to you. Her phone is off. What the hell is going on?" The old man's eyebrows went up at me. "But he's up at work, Rob tapped himself on the forehead. "No, I'm going to call my mom now." He quickly pulled out his phone, talked over something, and turned confusedly to Andrew. "Mom says she left on time and was in a big hurry. She said the old man went to Grandpa's house because she wasn't like those girls who just disappear without warning. That's for sure. Well, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to her parents." Andrew stood up. "And I didn't argue with you." Rob wasn't going to argue, of course, though he wanted to say a few words to the old man. They're the reason something's going on with his brother. Wendy looked at Rob in surprise, then at Andrew. She looked out on the landing. "Where's Lisa?" Rob looked at her in silence and didn't know how to tell her. "Wendy, don't worry. I'm sure there's an explanation for everything. For example, Lisa's phone just died, and she had to go somewhere urgently." The woman slowly sat down on the couch. "Lisa is very careful about everything. She can't have a dead phone. If it goes out somewhere, she always warns you. I take it she wasn't at your place today. Wendy looked at Andrew. No, she wasn't. I was going to go over there myself to apologize. The girl worked so hard, and we're two old fools. Wendy wrapped her arms around her head. She's gone. It's been over 5 hours. We have to go to the police. It's the first time James has raised his voice. At the police, no one will take a statement right away. We have to wait until 3 days have passed. Wendy exclaimed. James, 3 days? What are you saying? The man stood up resolutely. So Rob and I are going to the hospital now. Ask there if Lisa said anything or if anyone saw her come out. Andrew got up, and I had a fit. Will you, kind uncle, wait here? I don't want anything to happen to you. You're making a mess of things. Grown men. Could it be because of you, Lisa? Andrew sat down silently. Wendy's right. But peace, my brothers. Let me not give it to you. It was not enough to spoil it. At that moment the phone rang. Wendy wiped her tears and grabbed the phone. Oh my God. Speak of the devil. It's Dad. What are you doing up? There's so much time. Wendy, don't yell at your father. You don't want to talk to an old useless man. Get my granddaughter. I'll talk to her. Wendy wanted to say something, but she couldn't. Wendy cried. Wendy, what's wrong? Talk fast. I wonder why I can't sleep. Wendy. Andrew took the phone from Wendy Trevor's hands. Hey, Trevor, what are you doing there? You're trying to take over my family. Shut up, Trevor, and listen. Lisa's gone. The phone went silent. Andrew impatiently said, Are you deaf or what? As disappeared, Trevor's voice sounded muffled. So gone. While I was thinking how to make us up. While I was running to you. And she's gone. My son-in-law, where? Where, and who knows where? They're looking for him. This guy Rob is with him. He's looking for him too. I'll be there soon. What are you coming in? You old fool. Or did you buy a car? That's not your concern. And don't forget you're older. That makes you even more of a fool. The phone buzzed briefly. Wendy looked at Andrew. Well, he'll be here in a minute, she said. Where's he coming? What's the old man driving? Wendy shrugged. Trevor, meanwhile, was dialing the number of the cab. He found it in an ad in the paper. After talking to the girl and explaining everything about where he lived, he began to pack a bag. It is necessary to put all the necessary thermos, flashlight, clothes, find warmer. He put everything that he thought would be useful. Adriana, Rob and James, all of them realized that they would not learn anything new. They already wanted to go coming the route Lisa was supposed to take. As one ambulance driver remembered, I don't know if this information will be helpful to you. A guy came in for the day. Second intern with him all the time. Anyway, he was kind of hitting on Lisa, and the second intern heard her hiding behind the door over there. She didn't see me. I was just going into the gallery to get some boiling water for tea. Rob immediately grabbed the phone. He called, then called again until he got an answer. Max, you bastard, where are you? Did you even know how? Why the hell are you calling me? You're yelling at me at a time like this. Rob tried not to yell, but he wasn't very good at it. I'm not just gonna yell. I'm gonna interrupt you. Do you understand me? Where's Lisa? Or are you gonna answer me right away? Or I'm gonna find you right now. Max laughed. Rob, have you been drinking in there? How should I know? Where's your Lisa? Max, I'm not in the mood for jokes. I don't understand. Are you serious? Did something happen? Rob realized that his brother, no matter how bad he was, would never dare to do anything bad for which he would have to be held responsible. So I asked, Max, when was the last time you saw her? This afternoon. I tried to ask her out. I confess, you have. I thought about taking her off your hands. But she wouldn't even listen. I'm so sick of it. She's the dumbest person I've ever seen. So I tried to ask Lisa out. I never saw her again. I left right away. Hello, is she with you? Can I talk to her? I'm afraid I can't. She called about 4 o'clock. I told her it was over between us. She was screaming. Rob, where are you? Do you need any help? We can handle it. He disconnected, looked at James Isaac. We need to look for Lola, but we need to look the right way. We'll split up. I don't even know. Maybe we'll go through first. Okay, let's. They left the hospital and stopped on the street. There were 2 grandfathers waiting for them. Behind them stood Wendy. She looked questioningly at James, but he shook his head negatively. The woman immediately turned away to wipe away her tears. What are you doing here? Trevor glanced glumly at his son-in-law. Were you inspecting the road? No, we didn't have time. We'll go now. We had to go first. The grandfathers took the flashlights in their hands. Trevor handed his rucksack to Rob, and they moved away from the hospital. Or from behind the door banged tiredly on the door and sank tiredly to the floor. He was wet, floppy, cold. But the girl didn't care. She even suspected there were rats, but it wasn't scary anymore. It was only the first hour or 2 when she hurried to Andrew. Lola got in her way. Lisa, we need to talk. Lola, let's do it next time. What's wrong with you? Let's go behind the bushes. There's a bench behind the bushes, not just to talk. We need to talk. Lisa sighed. It was the first time she had seen Lola talking normally. If you're about Max, no, or because the conversation has nothing to do with him. Well, okay. Just for a little while. I'm in a big hurry. Sure enough, they wrapped up behind the bushes. Lisa saw no bench, only a dilapidated house. Apparently, it had already been vacated for demolition, and it looked terrifying. Where's the bench? A little further ahead. Lola followed behind on the narrow path. As soon as they appeared at the entrance to the cellar, Lola pushed her hard in the back, and Lisa literally rolled down. The girl shoved her until Lisa regained her senses into the basement room and closed the door. Lisa, when she heard Lola putting the lock on, screamed, Lola, what are you doing? You're out of your mind. You're the one who's crazy. What the hell are you doing? Always getting in my way. Now sit there until you die. Lola, you're going to jail. Let me out. No one will ever find you. Got it. Lisa started going through her pockets, but the bag and the phone must have stayed in front of the door. Hello. Hello. Open up. They'll find me anyway. Lisa heard some rustling. Then she listened again and realized that Lola was piling some branches or other debris in the entrance. The girl started pounding on the door in desperation. Lola, I beg you. But there was silence outside. Lisa pounded on the door with her hands, then her feet. She screamed when her voice was gone. She pounded on the door again with her feet, realizing with horror that no one was walking past the structure. That's where the police came in. She chased some alkies to homeless people. If they heard her, it was unclear whether it would be better. It was pitch black in the basement. There was a tiny crack in one side of the door, and it glowed slightly. When the glow disappeared, Lisa realized that it was dark outside. She sat on the floor and occasionally knocked on the door with her removed shoe. What's in here? Nothing. A wasteland. What wasteland with his house in sight? Trevor pointed the beam at the house. It's not a house. No one lives there anymore. James shuddered. No, she can't be there. Wendy cried. Trevor turned to her. But what's the baby saying? And what's the baby saying? Andrew supported his brother for the first time. There's no need to cry. Not why. As long as nothing has happened, nothing will happen. Rob went forward, and the old men lit the way. Rob thought that's what the old guard was all about, and their flashlights and backpacks were obviously useful. They walked around the house. Rob said nothing, no sign of anything, and even the basement was filled with trash. Andrew approached the opening to the basement. He looked there for a long time, then called Trevor over. They talked about something and Trevor ordered them to dismantle. James answered, I can take it apart, of course. But you can see that it's empty, and we will only waste time empty. You say, look how the grass is taken. So they've been carrying garbage here recently, and the grass hasn't grown yet. It takes 24 hours for the grass to come up, you know. Rob was already spreading out the trash. James joined him. Trevor raised his hand when half of it had been cleared, but silently everyone stopped. Faint thumps were heard from below. Lisa. Rob started up with redoubled energy. Wendy looked down in horror. The lock here is a healthy lock. Trevor told Andrew about the light. He pulled a knife out of his backpack, did some more picking, and the lock opened. Rob tore the door open, and Lisa fell at their feet, who, as soon as she heard the sounds, stood pressed against the door and whispered help. The voice was gone. It had been missing for hours. Wendy rushed downstairs. Lisa, you're all right. They didn't get home until the morning. Daddy, Uncle Andrew, I'll style your room for you. Trevor looked at his daughter, then at Andrew. My brother and I are going to go to his place, if that's okay with him. He seems to have more room. We'll talk about everything. Andrew nodded his head in agreement. Yes, James stood up. I'll take you. Wendy saw the men off and went to pack a bag. Lisa had been left at the hospital. We had to take things and then to the police. Lisa is squinting in the sun. She spent 24 hours in the hospital. They took some tests, gave her pills, and Lisa slept for 24 hours. Now her mom called, said they were waiting for her downstairs. The doctor gave her the certificate, told her to be careful. She went down the stairs and thought that, as it turned out, it was so great to live that it was impossible to tell. And if she could still get to try on her grandfather's. Lisa knew that Lola had been taken to the police and that sort of even Max had gone there. Probably realized it was all for him. But I didn't want to think about the ball. I didn't want to forgive or be angry. That's all. She was only a few steps away from the ball when Rob rushed up to meet her. Lisa blushed immediately. She remembered him stroking her cheek, her arm. When she'd been found, she hadn't cared then. Now she thought that everyone had seen it. She'd lost consciousness almost immediately. Like the doctor said, the shock of being found was worse than the shock of being hidden in the basement. Lisa, how are you? Did he put his arm around her? Or did you lock yourself away from her all right? Thank you. You're welcome. It's the grandfathers. The grandfathers. Why does he talk about them? As if they were one and the same. Lisa followed his gaze and saw the grandfathers. They were standing off to the side, talking peacefully. Lisa even lost her eyes. No, they're really standing there, talking, even laughing. Rob, did they make up? They totally made up. And it's all thanks to you. Lisa fell into the arms of Mom, then Dad, then Grandpa. She was smiling. She couldn't believe that these two old people were really talking, smiling, and no one wanted to kill anyone. Already at home at the set table. When Rob and Lisa talked about how they were going to set it up, as if the girl had been in an accident. Trevor looked at Andrew and stood up. Andrew stood up after him as well. We apologize. We want to apologize to you, Lisa. If it wasn't for you, we'd be dead. Lisa hugged them and then signaled Rob to go out on the balcony. She looked so mysterious that Rob was immediately worried. Oh, this was not good. They went out on the balcony, looked down at the kids playing on the playground for a while. Then Lisa turned sharply to Rob. You know, I've got a cool idea for reconciling Grandpa Andrew and his son. Rob realized that his fears were justified. Lisa's eyes were sparkling. She was ready to rush back into the fray. He grabbed her arm and literally dragged her into the room. Just a moment, everyone. Our Lisa, who almost died yesterday, announces a new adventure. Andrew Saveleave's reconciliation with his son. I think something should be done about it. Andrew stood up, smiled. I called the kids yesterday. They'll be here by this evening. Lisa clapped his hands together, but Rob raised his hand again. It's not all about watching Lisa. I realized she needed constant supervision. That's why everyone froze. He turned to the girl, who was looking at him with huge eyes. That's why I'm asking for Lisa's hand in marriage. As a husband, it will be much more convenient for me to keep her away from all sorts of detective stories." Wendy cried at once. The old men murmured approvingly. They liked Rob right away. James put his arm around his wife. "Come on. There's no need to cry. Rob will take good care of our daughter." Rob looked at Lisa carefully. "What do you think?" Lisa snuggled up to him. "What can I say? The two of us can do so much more." Rob grabbed her and surrounded her. Everyone present laughed at the girl's words.